In the heart of France, Jeffrey's innocent flirtation with Yvonne turns deadly. His wife Rachel and her ally Jack have laid a trap, using Yvonne as bait. Jeffrey is caught between desire and betrayal, unaware he's being watched. Mandy, the sharp-eyed investigator, uncovers the truth. Deception, passion, and revenge collide. Jeffrey must act fast. Will he escape or lose everything? I was on a Qantas flight with my 3 daughters and their husbands. Rachel, my eldest daughter, couldn't join us because of a problem in her husband's family. We had a good time sharing stories about what was happening in our lives. They were all excited about having a white Christmas, but I had to remind them that we were going to the south of France, so it might not happen. After 22 hours, we arrived in Paris and went to our hotel. I had set up a nice place where we could get a good night's sleep without being disturbed too often. The next day, we took a 4-hour fast train to Avignon. I felt nervous for the last half hour because Rachel was picking us up from the train station. My oldest daughter saw this and leaned over to me asking if I was okay since I looked a bit pale. I brushed it off, saying I was just tired from the journey, but inside I felt uneasy. At the Avignon train station, Rachel was on the platform, waving excitedly. My youngest daughter ran to her and gave her a big hug. The rest of us quickly followed as my husband and I collected our bags from the train. It was a busy scene, and I stayed back for a moment. Rachel, being in charge, gathered her daughters and their partners and led them to the exit. After that, she came over to me, gave me a quick hug and a kiss on the cheek, and then went toward the parking lot. I watched her for a moment. She looked great. Her hair was short and she had dropped the bright colors. A little gray around her hair made her look more elegant. She had lost the extra weight she had gained 6 months ago, and I wondered how she managed that. I felt a twinge of jealousy. What am I doing here, I thought. Just then, my oldest daughter turned around and saw me still standing there. "Come on," she said, waving for me to catch up. There was a minibus parked nearby with a tall man next to it. He had a round belly that hung over his pants, a big nose, and messy dark hair with a worn-out hat on his head. Rachel started introducing everyone to Jacques. I finally met this man who seemed to be a big part of Rachel's life. He greeted my daughters with kisses on their cheeks, making them giggle, and shook hands with my sons-in-law. Then it was my turn. We stood close and shook hands firmly, both of us curious about each other's reaction. I let go of his hand first, pretending to shake my hand a bit when he held on a little longer. He smiled at me, and I sensed a hint of pride in him as he turned away to open the driver's door of the minibus. We put our bags in the back seat and then took our places inside. Jacques signaled for Rachel to sit in the front. She hesitated for a moment, but then followed his lead. He whispered something in French to her as she sat down and shot me a disapproving look. I wasn't upset. It can be helpful to fly under the radar sometimes. During the drive to Rachel's villa, she acted like a tour guide, showing us different places. I mostly tuned her out since the French sights didn't interest me at that moment. Eventually, we arrived at a driveway with a big automatic wrought iron gate that looked new or at least polished. Trees lined both sides, making it seem like we were driving through a tunnel. After about 150 meters, the path opened up into a round area in front of a grand 2-story stone house. In the circle were many freshly planted rose beds. The stems stood bare, waiting for the warmth of spring to bring them to life. "Welcome to Lamaze, everyone!" Rachel shouted, standing in the aisle of the bus and spreading her arms wide. We got off, grabbed our bags, and headed to the large wooden front door. It didn't look very inviting from the outside. I later learned they had to keep the outside as it was because of its historic value, but the inside was a different story. It was fancy in a way that felt over the top. There was polished concrete and marble everywhere, made softer by wooden accents and carpets. Old furniture mixed with modern gadgets. It reminded me of something I had seen before. How do I know about such places? One of my clients owns several, and he wanted to expand one with a nearby house. He had taken me on a tour to help figure out the costs for fixing up the extra property. The backyard was even more impressive. There must have been some kind of garden before, as it looked like it had been tidied up with some new plants added. To the left, though, I spotted my wife's hand again. A huge pool had been set into the lawn. Apparently, the one in the pictures Rachel had shown when she bought the house was too small. I guessed it to be about 30 by 8 meters. Behind it was a construction area that Rachel called a cottage. I had seen townhouses smaller than that. The girls were excited, already talking about returning in the summer. Now I was starting to piece together where some of the money had been spent. We went back inside where Rachel took my daughters and their partners to their rooms. I stayed in the main living room, unsure of where my bed would be. Jack left in a minibus, which was a relief. No more disapproving looks for now. My wife came back. It was the first time we had been alone together since our trip, during which she didn't come back. "So, Jeffrey, what do you think?" she asked. "It looks great," I replied carefully. "It must have cost a lot." "Oh, Jeffrey, why do you always focus on money? We have plenty of it," she said, sounding a bit annoyed. "Jack helped me get a lot of things in bulk and made sure I didn't get ripped off. I really saved money. Some things never change. Only my wife can spend money and call it saving." "Come with me," she said. She kept talking. "Our rooms are over here." We walked to a part of the house away from where the kids were. As we went down a short hallway, we entered a large room filled with couches and tables. There was a staircase against one wall that went up to the next floor. After we climbed the stairs, we stepped into the main bedroom. It had a whole wall made of glass that looked out at the garden, and there was a big bed. I had seen big beds before, but this one was larger, with 4 tall posts at each corner. The bathroom, shower, and bathtub were hidden behind a wooden wall next to the stairs. Behind the bed, there was another wall with doors on each side. These opened into big closets for both of us. "Wow," I said softly. "Isn't it amazing?" I asked. "Isn't it too bright here in the mornings?" Rachel seemed ready for this question. She picked up the remote, pressed a button, and the blinds disappeared into the ceiling, making the room dim. "Don't worry, Jeffrey. I've got everything covered. I'll let you unpack, and I'll make sure Juliet gets dinner ready for us tonight." She pressed the button again, and the blinds started to go back up. By the time they were fully open, she was gone. I stepped into the room and felt a bit lost. My bag barely fit into 2 drawers. I hung up my nice suit and looked for the others. They were in the main living room having some wine. We cheered to our good luck and then enjoyed a nice dinner together. Because of jet lag and a few drinks, we went to bed early while Rachel stayed downstairs to clean up. I took a shower and then climbed into bed. It was hard to believe how big this bed was. 5 adults could lie down without touching each other. It was custom-made, just like the mattress and sheets. I fell asleep right away and didn't notice Rachel coming over to the bed. For all I knew, she didn't see me either. 12 hours later, she woke me up. "Time to get up, Jeffrey. Your first tour starts in 40 minutes. Opening my eyes, I saw Rachel sitting on the bed. She messed up my hair and I almost thought she would kiss me. But she didn't. "Take a shower and meet everyone downstairs. The kids are already having breakfast." She got up quickly and rushed down the stairs. After I showered, I went to the kitchen. The rest of the family was happily talking about the day ahead. Workers were busy at the construction site next to the pool. Rachel saw me looking out the window. "They're getting ready for Christmas. I have a few more guests coming over for Christmas and Boxing Day." "Oh," I said quietly. My daughters were excited enough for both of us. "I've set up some trips for the next couple of days. I'll be busy making sure the workers stay on schedule." Rachel didn't seem to notice my lack of interest. "Is Jack going to take us with him?" I asked. "No, he's too busy. But he has another guy to take you. Hurry and eat breakfast. The bus will be here any minute." I sat down at the table and Juliet brought in a big plate of food. I thought about how much it must cost to have 3 meals a day made by such a good cook. As I finished the last bit of my meal, an elegant woman walked into the kitchen and greeted my wife with friendly kisses on both cheeks. I liked how Rachel clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Everyone, listen up. This is Yvonne. She will be your guide for the next few days." Yvonne smiled brightly and waved to us. Rachel then explained what we would do and told us to get on the bus. So began our long days of visiting old Roman ruins, beautiful churches, and busy markets. Without Yvonne, I'd have found it hard to enjoy myself. She was cheerful, charming, and lovely. She insisted I sit in the front of the bus with her. Her French accent was lovely to hear. She was small, almost like a doll, with soft features and always dressed very nicely. I began to look forward to our last morning when the bus would come to pick us up again. We were at a market in a little village during lunchtime. My daughters were pulling their husbands from stall to stall while I sat in a cafe overlooking the market square with Yvonne. "Did you enjoy your time with me?" she asked softly. "It was short. What do we have planned for the rest of the day?" "I think we've seen enough cities and churches, so I've arranged some visits to local vineyards for wine tastings." "That sounds great. What about dinner?" I asked, feeling hopeful. "We'll meet Rachel at a nice restaurant. And tomorrow?" I asked, wishing for good news. "No sightseeing tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve. Time for family." I couldn't hide my disappointment and took a sip of my coffee. Yvonne leaned in closer and touched my arm. She liked to connect with people when she talked, and I found it nice when she touched me. "Jeffrey, can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course. You and Rachel are—" She hesitated. "Living apart?" she finished. She leaned in even closer to hear my answer. Her perfume surrounded me. "No," I replied quickly. She pulled back. "That's too bad." I thought about what it might be like to be close to Yvonne, but I didn't think she felt the same way. The afternoon took an unexpected turn as Yvonne's playful touches began to mean something different. While we stood at a bench tasting wines, her hand brushed against me. Before, I would have thought it was an accident, but her eyes told me she had other thoughts. A crowd had gathered around the vineyard for tastings. My daughters were lost in the crowd, eager to try the wine. I kept my distance, and Yvonne grabbed my hand. She pulled me outside to the garden behind a tall hedge. "Please, Jeffrey, hug me," she said with intensity. I wanted to move closer, but I stayed still. Yvonne leaned in and kissed me softly. I felt her warmth and couldn't help but respond, wrapping my arms around her. I was taken in by her sweet smell. Yvonne's hands moved gently down my face. One stayed on my shoulder while the other slid lower. Suddenly, I heard voices nearby and reality hit me. More people had come into the garden and I knew I had to step back. We let go of each other. "This is wrong," I whispered. "I want you, but this isn't right." She tried to come closer again, but I moved back. "I'm married. My children are just a few steps away. You want me, I can tell, but I can't. After dinner, I'm staying at a rental near the restaurant. Just tell everyone you don't feel well. I'll take you home later." As she spoke, she reached for me again. We hugged again and then kissed. Inside, I struggled with my feelings. "I want this, but I can't. You have to. This might be our only chance. Christmas is coming and you won't be around. Please, I need you." Hearing my daughter's voice nearby made me pull away from Yvonne. I stepped back behind some bushes. "There you are. What were you doing?" my daughter asked. "Yvonne was just showing me the garden," I said, trying to sound relaxed. I could feel my face getting warm. "Anyone would think you were hiding something," she teased. Then she laughed, as though the idea was funny. Taking my hand, she led me to the cellar door. "Come on. I want you to try some wine." I did my best to keep my distance from Yvonne after that, but when we arrived at the village restaurant, my family got out of the car, leaving us alone in the front seat. Yvonne took my hand. "Remember after dinner? Just say you feel unwell." She squeezed my hand and then got out of the car. Inside the restaurant, Rachel was already sitting next to a woman I didn't know. At the end of the table was a familiar face we all knew. When we walked in, everyone stood up, and Rachel started to introduce us. The second woman was tall and sturdy, with a nice smile and neat hair, looking to be around 40. "Jeffrey, this is Mandy. She's from London, and Josh is helping her find a place to live here. I've invited her to spend Christmas with us." "Wow, is that really my private investigator?" "Nice to meet you," I said, reaching out my hand. "Same to you," Mandy replied, as she took my hand and kissed both my cheeks. "Hi there," she whispered playfully. Had she just shared my secret with Rachel? I didn't think she would, but seeing her here made me feel confused. I made my way to the bathroom to gather my thoughts. After splashing cold water on my face and calming down my heart, I was about to head back to my desk when a big, strong hand pulled me into the handicapped bathroom. "We don't have much time, so listen carefully," Mandy said. "Stay away from Yvonne. It's a trap." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean a trap?" I was still shocked from the sudden pull. Mandy explained, "The apartment is being watched. Rachel wants to make you look bad." But that won't matter in a divorce, I replied. She shook her head. In Australia, divorces don't need a reason. Rachel is thinking about her family, especially your daughters. She wants to end the marriage. I felt a knot in my stomach. Is she going to tell me this soon? Yes, right before you go home. They will have a lawyer in Sydney begin the process. Who are they? Jack and Rachel. How do I know all this? Well, Rachel didn't tell me, but I planted a small device in Jack's office during our last meeting. I can't record, but I can hear conversations if I'm close enough. I had a lot of coffee near his office yesterday. Oh no, that's risky. Just focus and get back out there before they find you. Mandy turned me back toward the door. What should I do? I asked, feeling lost. That's your choice. But really, avoid Yvonne. You don't want to deal with 4 angry family members after the holidays. The holidays? Yes, that's when everything will go down. Jack will accuse you of cheating with Yvonne. If you deny it, they have proof from the apartment. Rachel will ask you to leave, and Jack will comfort her. Your daughters will think you're terrible. Great. I sat down on the toilet seat, feeling overwhelmed. Just stay away from Yvonne and see what happens, Mandy said, pulling me to my feet. I walked back out, but it was hard to stay away from Yvonne. The only open seat other than Mandy's was right beside her. As I hesitated, Rachel called out my name, and I had no choice but to sit down near Yvonne. You look a bit pale. Are you okay? Rachel asked. Yeah, it's just been a long day, I replied, sitting by Yvonne. The next hour felt like torture. Yvonne kept reaching for me under the table. It was tough to eat and keep her away at the same time. Without Mandy's warning, I might have been flattered by her attention, but now I realized it wasn't real. When the main course arrived, I noticed Jack and Rachel both watching Yvonne. They looked confused as to why we hadn't left the table. Rachel tried to step in and change the situation. Jeffrey, you don't seem well. You have a long flight home ahead. Maybe Yvonne can drive you home so you can get some rest. No, I'm fine, I said cheerfully. Doesn't this dinner look nice? Eat, and then I'll take you home, Yvonne said softly, reaching for my leg. No, I can sleep on the plane, I replied. I made it through the rest of the meal, hoping they would stop their plans. But they didn't. The bus was almost full, but there was one seat left. Now there were 2 more people going home, Mandy and Rachel. Rachel spoke up again. Jeffrey, can you wait here for the next trip? Jack will drive, and when he's done, he'll come back for you. Yvonne will keep you company. It felt more like a command than a question. I wasn't sure what to say. Mandy wanted to help. It's okay, Rachel, I can stay, she said. No way, you're my guest, Rachel replied, guiding Mandy toward the bus. James and I are staying, my oldest daughter said, pointing at her husband. You've been telling Dad all evening that he looks out of place. He won't enjoy standing here for 40 minutes. Rachel wanted to argue but saw it wouldn't help. Her daughter was very determined. I slid to the back and pretended to sleep, watching Rachel and Jack chatting up front. They spoke in French, so no one else could follow. Just before we got to the house, they fell silent. Once inside, I hurried to the bedroom and took a shower. I was about to get into bed when Rachel walked in. She looked ready to talk. Can we chat? She asked softly. This was different from her usual serious self. Yes, of course. What about? As if I didn't know. I'm not going home with you, she said firmly. I know, I blurted out without thinking. I only have tickets for the girls. Looks like you'll have to wait until after the work is done. She had a chance to change her mind. She hesitated but decided to keep going. I'm never going home. This is my home now. She probably thought I would explode. She didn't know I understood everything. I had been here a week. I understand, but I think we can sort this out. You like it here? I like it at home. We can have a long-distance marriage. I'll visit when I can. Who knows? France might be nice for me too. The look on her face was priceless. I could see her brain working, trying to find an answer. Finally, she said, I want a divorce. Have you found someone else? I asked, watching her closely. She didn't flinch. No. But I don't think we can do the long-distance thing. At first, she sounded abrupt, but then her tone softened as she spoke. I took out my phone and started looking at the menu. Why don't you put that away? We're trying to talk here, Rachel said. I found what I wanted, hit play, and turned up the volume. It wasn't very loud, but the sounds were clear. Rachel gasped and covered her face with her hands. You really need to learn how to stop your phone, I said, But I guess you were busy. I felt annoyed and pressed stop. The room fell quiet. Rachel slumped in her chair, resting her head on her hands. "Have you told the kids?" I asked. "What do you think? Do you really think I'd be so mean?" she replied. She let out a loud cry, and I confronted her again. "I'm leaving in the morning," I said, getting up and grabbing a pillow. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm going to sleep in the living room. The kids deserve to know they're not little anymore." "And you just told me you want a divorce," I said. "I guess it's only a matter of time before they find out." I pulled the blanket off the bed and rushed out, slamming the door. I started off calmly, but her attitude made me angry. Rachel was crying, but I felt like it was more for herself than for us. I walked into the living room and saw Mandy, still awake with a glass of red wine. "Nice pajamas," she said, but her smile faded when she saw my face. "Trouble in paradise?" I sighed. "I'm sleeping on the couch tonight and I'm leaving tomorrow." "What?" A voice came from behind me. It was my daughter and son-in-law who must have just arrived. "Why are you leaving tomorrow? Are you and Mom fighting? You were supposed to stay another week." When I turned to look at her confused face, my heart sank. I opened my arms and she came over for a hug. "Your mom and I are getting a divorce, Pumpkin. After almost 30 years together, we've grown apart," I said, gently running my hand through her hair. "But you can't. You and Mom never fight," she responded. "You just do what Mommy says." She didn't say more. Her words said it all. I held her for another few minutes, then handed her to her husband. "Go back to sleep. I'll see you in the morning when I talk to everyone else." She left with her husband, still sniffing. Mandy went to her room, and I turned off the light before heading to the library. After lying there for a few hours, I finally fell asleep. I woke up at 7 and quickly took out my smartphone, planning to escape this place today. Christmas Eve wasn't the best time for last-minute travel plans, but I figured out how to get back to Australia. It was a tricky journey, needing to take a train to Paris, then a plane to London, and then to Japan before finally making it home. But if everything went smoothly, it would work out. I walked into the kitchen and saw my daughters were already awake. The place felt very quiet and sad. The youngest ran to me, crying, "Why, Daddy? Why?" It seemed like their mother had made the first move. "People change, dear," I said. "What was once good is now broken." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hope. "But can it be fixed?" "It has to be wanted by both people. In this case, it isn't." "Where's your mom?" I asked. "She went for a walk." I took a deep breath. "Girls, I have to go home today, so I won't be here for Christmas. But I'll see you when you get back to Australia." They protested, but I think they understood that if I stayed, Christmas would be even harder. I made a cup of coffee and went outside to the pool to drink it. It was hot, but that gave me some peace. I was just finishing when Mandy came out. "How are you doing this morning?" she asked carefully. "Fine. The last few months have been tough." "It's actually nice to have everything cleared up. We can all move on now. What's your plan?" I said. "I'm going home. I arranged it this morning." "Can I get a ride to the train station?" Mandy had a rental car. "Yes, of course. I'm leaving soon, too. Mind if I take the train with you?" "You won't stay for Christmas?" I asked with a smirk. "I've seen merrier faces on dogs in the street," Mandy said, pointing to the sad faces in the kitchen. I frowned. "Yeah, I guess some company would be nice," she added. I went back to the bedroom to pack my things. I was putting my bag in Mandy's car when Rachel pulled into the driveway. A car that looked like Jack's drove by and parked. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "Yeah, I have a flight," I replied while checking my watch. "Home is where my heart is." My sarcasm seemed to hurt her feelings. "We need to talk," she said. "I don't think we do. But we should discuss our life together." "You only want to talk when you need something from me," I replied. "Now that you want a divorce, there's no point." She looked upset, shifting her weight nervously. "I need money," she said quietly. "What? You've spent a lot of money in the last year." "This is about a land deal," she insisted. "Let me guess, Jack is handling it for you." "Did you ever think maybe Jack cares more about taking money from wealthy women than real estate?" I fired back. "How dare you? You rude Australian! I'll take half of what you have." "And then you'll hand it over to Jack and wake up alone. He'll be gone to find someone else with money." Or maybe he'll just trade you in for a newer model, I added. I heard a sigh behind me and turned around. The family was standing on the path in front of the door. I wasn't sure how much they had heard. Rachel noticed them and let out a cry. She quickly rushed past me and went inside with her daughters. The girls stood there, unsure if they should follow their mom or say goodbye to their dad. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I should go." I waved my hand awkwardly, closed the trunk of Mandy's car, and got into the front seat. I hoped Mandy wouldn't take long. 5 minutes later, she came out pulling a bag. My daughters had already gone into the house. Well, you know how to leave properly, just like the song says. "Shut up and drive, drive, drive," I said. "Touché." "Are you going to be this friendly all the way to Paris?" Mandy replied. "Just give me a minute, I need to calm down," I said, trying to stay calm, my fists clenched. We traveled in silence to the train station. Mandy went to return the rental car while I got the tickets. We had 5 minutes, so we grabbed coffee, but we quickly regretted it. The coffee was not good. By the time we got on the train, I felt calmer. We talked about what happens after a divorce. Mandy couldn't help much since each country has different laws. I only knew one thing about Australian law. It's a no-fault divorce. This means that it doesn't matter who was at fault if the marriage lasted more than 2 years. Either partner could make a claim against the other. Knowing this and Rachel's wish for money, we figured she would go after it hard. I accepted it and was ready to make some compromises, especially if the money I gave my sister wasn't found out. I thought the money transferred directly to her would be safe since it wasn't linked to my accounts, but a check with the lottery company would reveal that I had won $30 million. With Rachel and Jock's strong desire for the money, I needed to be careful. I couldn't talk to my sister about the money over the phone or through email. Everything had to be discussed face-to-face in a safe place. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I hired a private investigator and I assumed they would do the same. After we arrived in Paris, we took a shuttle to the airport quickly. We said our goodbyes and Mandy offered to help with anything I needed. "Sure, for a small fee," I joked. "Don't you want to come with me and spend Christmas in London?" I asked. "That sounds tempting, but I just want to get home," she replied. I wasn't really tempted. I wouldn't have accepted an invitation from anyone, not even someone like Angelina Jolie. I missed spending Christmas since I flew out on Christmas Eve. I arrived in Australia on Boxing Day. There wasn't much to celebrate while I was in Sydney. I texted my sister to ask if I could stay with her, then took a cab to her house. She lived in a nice house in Woollahra. One evening, her boyfriend and his parents came over for dinner. She opened the door with a smile, but it quickly faded. "Oh my God, you look terrible. Are you okay?" "Yes, but I'm really tired. A lot of things have piled up." "Rachel?" "Yeah, we're officially divorced." "Oh no. Well, come in. I see you don't want to socialize right now. You can go upstairs to the spare room and I'll find a way to keep everyone busy." "Thank you. You're the best." I slowly made my way upstairs and slept for 17 hours. I woke up at noon to a rainy day in Sydney. It was hot and sticky. I went downstairs to find my sister washing dishes. "You look much better. Are you feeling okay now?" "Yeah, it feels good to be home." She dried her hands and gave me a hug. "Sit down and tell me everything while I make you something to eat." So I did. I talked and talked while I ate, and before I knew it, it was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I shared everything, from money troubles to arguments. She already knew about the lottery, but I explained why I had kept the 10 million hidden, the investigation, and a dramatic Christmas vacation with a big fight. When I finished, my sister went to the fridge, took out a bottle of wine, and poured us each a glass. I know a good divorce lawyer. We went to school together. I think I'll ask Brian to help us. I know he's not a top expert, but he knows both Rachel and me and understands our money situation. Except for your investments. And he lives close by. I don't like going into Sydney. Rachel always tries to pull something. So, do you think it will be hard? Yes, Jack is clearly pushing it. Do you still keep track of the calls that come in? My sister had an ex-boyfriend who wouldn't let go. Yeah. Why do you ask? And how long do you keep those records? They automatically save to my computer, so I have them since I set them up. Can you look to see when I won the lottery? I called you the day I bought the ticket, but I only got your message from the bank. They don't know that story. I can tell them. We considered splitting the winnings, but they won't agree. You're not going to tell them, are you? No, but any good investigator will talk to the lottery people. I have to assume they'll find out. Besides, I'll need to give them a list of companies where I'm a director. It's a long list since I'm linked to many family-run businesses that use my accounting firm. I'm just a neutral person they trust for issues. If they dig and find out your company got 10 million on the same day Rachel and I did, they might catch on. Yes, I suppose. She lifted her glass. Good luck to you, you old friend. We clinked glasses and laughed. Speaking of luck, how is your investment going? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. Well, I don't usually brag, but things are going pretty well. Really? What did you choose to invest in? Bank stocks? Resources? I stayed away from the stock market. A lot of companies have stock prices that are high compared to what they earn. My boyfriend trades futures, so that's where I chose to go. Isn't that risky? She laughed. You sound like a true accountant. What kind of futures do they trade on the ASX? Metals, currencies? Not so much the soft ones. Actually, more like crops. Are you serious? I know so many clients who lost money on those. That's because your clients grow those crops. They can't see things clearly. Really? And you know so much about wheat and canola? No, I don't. But I do know that when I started, prices were at all-time highs, and the US and Europe just planted a big crop. So, I took delivery positions at those high prices, then saw them drop and ended up closing them out with a big gain. How much did you make? Well, I closed almost all my trades right before Christmas. The market hit its lowest point after the US harvest in August. It hasn't moved much since, so it's not worth my time to keep track. Last I checked, I made $4.2 million. Wow. And how much did you risk? About $7 million. She said it casually. My heart raced. How could you stay calm? It wasn't my money. It was yours. She gave a sly smile. I was shocked. I opened my mouth but couldn't find the right words. Keep quiet. Things can change fast, but you'll stay the same. So when will you need the money? Hopefully not too soon. I can easily manage $5 million if the court decides that way. $5 million? You're joking. She got the same amount as you. It's not your fault. She gave it to that awful guy. Yes, but we were still married then. It seems they are counting what was owned since the split. They say she's broke now, so they will want their share from me. That's still unfair. Not really, but it looks like she deserves half of the $10 million I gave you. So 5 would be fair. My sister fell quiet and looked at me over her wine glass for a moment before answering. I didn't think you could plan like that. You're quite clever. I felt bad for you, but you outsmarted Rachel from the start. You weren't thinking about a divorce, were you? There was a bit of accusation in her voice. No, I don't think so. We just didn't get along. It was more like my backup money. So even if Rachel takes most of it, there will still be some to keep trouble away. Maybe a little left for the kids. I've owned the bank for so long that if you add up all the interest, I've probably paid back what I borrowed twice already. But before all that, I was really in over my head. And what will you do when it's all finished? I'm going to stay in my small hometown. Every morning, I'll walk down the main street and say hello to the shopkeepers on my way to work. I'll do my daily tasks at work and then head home, chatting with everyone I meet along the way. In short, I'll keep my routine. But now I can relax a bit when I get home. No traveling, fast cars, or wild parties. That's not really me. I might explore a little. I've always wanted to walk the Kokoda Trail in Papua New Guinea to understand what Uncle Jack went through while fighting in World War II. Maybe I'll try some fishing in new places, but really, I'm just a simple man. A simple man who feels lonely sometimes. Someone asked me if I would be more careful about who I let into my heart. I said maybe, but I wasn't looking for anyone yet. I thought about Charlie for a moment. I remember I wasn't looking the first time either. Rachel planned our courtship and wedding after our second date. We sat quietly, sipping our drinks. I thought about how Christmas went while I was away. My sister placed her hand on mine and spoke again. Jeffrey, are you with me? I felt bad for being lost in thought. I told her I was sorry. So you didn't hear anything at all? I shook my head. Well, here's the short version. Don't change. Jeffrey, you've always been a good and reliable person in our family. You might be a bit boring and old, but that's how it should be. You work in a steady job, for goodness sake. All this hiding and snooping is out of character for you. I understand why you've been acting this way, given the situation. But when it's all over, just go back to being the brother I love. It's good I bought the shortened version. I joked back. Very clever, she said with a smile. I'm glad you took my advice, because that's the kind of dad joke I expect from you. I stuck my tongue out at her. She made a funny face, and we both laughed, feeling like kids again. I stayed at my sister's for one more night before going home. It was quiet there, and I spent the week gardening until I went back to work on January 3rd. During that week, my daughters came home to visit. They took turns staying overnight. They weren't very happy and were upset with both of us. I tried to explain that things had changed while they were away. It felt like we were two strangers living together. The older girls seemed to understand, but the youngest had a harder time with it. I tried to joke, saying they were lucky to have a place to stay abroad now. That didn't go over well. They might have been mad at Rachel and me, but they really didn't like Jock. He had moved into our house on Christmas Day. He started asking about my finances through Rachel. They told her I was giving them money, and he kept notes in a planner he carried everywhere. The divorce plan was moving forward. It seemed lawyers take longer holidays because 3 weeks later, a courier came to my door. I signed for a package and received a copy of the preliminary divorce papers from the week before. I had already met with my lawyer for lunch, where we talked about what was coming next. He explained things to me, and I looked over the documents briefly but didn't dive deep into them. I called Brian to let him know I received some papers from Rachel's lawyers and was sending one of the office staff to deliver them to him. He said he would take a look, and we agreed to meet up after work at his office. I arrived just as his assistant was leaving for the day. She told me he was inside, so I went in. He was sitting in a chair going through some papers. "Are you ready, or do you want me to come back tomorrow?" I asked, standing at the door. No, come in and sit down," he replied. "I just wanted to review these again. They seem pretty straightforward, but it's clear you see things differently than I do. These papers," he said, holding up a stack, "are like a cash book for you." "Well, what's the conclusion?" I asked. "Like I said, they need the name of your attorney, copies of your last 2 tax returns, and a list of your assets. The only twist is they want the case to be moved along quickly. Isn't that usual?" I wondered. "Yes, but the Australian family court doesn't usually move fast for divorces. They want to see proof that you've been separated for 12 months before you can start the process. They don't like it when people get back together right away after a divorce. But if they start counting the separation from when I first left France, that's more than 6 months," I countered. "True, but you mentioned Rachel still had money then, so they consider the separation starting on Christmas Eve. That means she'll have no money, and they'll claim half of what you have left. So what's our next step?" I asked. "That depends on what you want. They will ask the family court for a fast hearing since you'll be living far apart, making it unlikely you'd get back together. You can agree to speed things up, or you can slow it down. There are 2 options in family court: the regular route in front of the full court or a more informal meeting. Which one do they want?" I asked. "They want the full trial. This law firm is quite tough. They want to go all out." "Okay, let's agree to a fast trial, but we want it to be informal. If they really want to be heard, we'll do it on our terms. That's my offer, Brian." "Agreed. Should I send my financial info now?" "Oh no, let's wait until the court agrees to hear the case. Then they will give us a deadline." "Great. I'll leave it to you to write a proper response, and please let me know when you hear back." "No problem at all. Jeff, how are you holding up with all this?" "I'm fine," I replied, only half convinced. "Want to grab a steak dinner at the pub?" "No, Jeff. Sorry. My wife is having a book club meeting tonight, and I'm going to make drinks for her and her friends. Maybe another time this week," Brian said, getting up from his chair. "Yeah, sure, I'll call you," I replied, trying to sound friendly. But I didn't want to go back to an empty house tonight. It felt so dull. Even though I didn't always enjoy Rachel's strong personality, having her around was better than having no one at all. I thought about joining a club or a sports group to get involved in something new. After leaving Brian's office, I went to the grocery store. I was looking at the meat section, thinking about what to grill for dinner with mashed potatoes and green beans, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Jeffrey, how was your Christmas vacation?" Charlie asked cheerfully. I turned around and saw her pushing a shopping cart. "I spent Christmas Day on a plane coming home, so it wasn't great," I said with a bit of bitterness. I could see she felt awkward. I knew flying was part of the deal. I just needed to deal with it. "How about you?" I tried to sound cheerful. "It was nice. We visited a park by the coast. It's better to be away from home on special days. It helps to forget some past feelings. I felt a bit uneasy now. It was strange how caught up I was in my own problems, thinking they were the worst. Charlie reminded me how small my troubles were. "How's David?" I asked, changing the subject. "He has a cricket camp next week and is really excited," she said, smiling. I did something I don't usually do. I acted on impulse. "I'm putting dinner together. Would you like to come over tonight?" Her smile faded slightly. "Okay, you get the meat, and I'll make the salad." "Great. At least something will be good," I grinned, thinking about how I should probably hire a cleaner. "What time?" "When you get here, I'll take my things home first and then make the salad in about an hour." "See you then." I picked out a steak and some chicken fillets and headed home. As I tidied up the living room, I regretted not vacuuming or mopping. Just then, the doorbell rang. I looked around quickly. I noticed a stack of empty picture frames on the mantel. I was in the middle of putting away a few happy pictures of Rachel and me. When the doorbell rang again, I went to let Charlie in. As I opened the door, I saw her balancing 3 bowls, about to ring the bell again. I quickly grabbed one just before it fell. "I thought you changed your mind," she said, sounding a little annoyed. "I'm sorry. The cleaner is off today and I was trying to tidy up," I mumbled as I welcomed her in. Charlie set the bowl on the counter and looked around, then at me. "You should have asked for my help." She glanced around again. "I'm sorry for rushing in like that. You start cooking and I'll tidy up," I said. I took the steaks outside to the barbecue. When I came back, the room felt much nicer. The windows were open to let fresh air in, and the table was all set. "Would you like a glass of wine?" I asked as I placed the steaks on the table. "Yes, that sounds great. Red or white?" "I know it may be odd, but I prefer white." "No problem," I said, heading to the fridge to grab a bottle of Pinot Grigio. We sat at the table. I poured while Charlie served the food, and we chatted as we ate. After dinner, I cleaned up and loaded the dishes into the dishwasher while Charlie worked on the coffee maker. We went outside to the terrace where the heat from the day was starting to go away. I shared a bit about my trip to France. "So it's finished then?" she asked. "Yes and no. The relationship is over for sure, but the breakup?" I replied, "I think the legal part might take a while." "What about the money?" she asked. "I'm ready to give her half, but she might want a lot more." "How much is half?" "I'm sorry, you don't need to answer. But actually, it's about 5 million. 5 million? I would be overjoyed if I saw even a smaller amount of that," she said. "Did you receive any insurance from your husband's passing?" "No, the insurance companies are tricky. He had just started a new job 6 months before he passed. He moved his retirement plan to a new company which was supposed to have life insurance. But 2 months after he passed, I got a letter saying they considered it a pre-existing condition. All I received was the $30,000 he had in his retirement fund," she added. "Do you own your house?" I asked. "Yes, but there's a mortgage. The $250,000 we were supposed to get should have covered it, but it didn't. I'm not a lawyer, but I've dealt with insurance companies before, and I believe you should have been paid," I said. "So do I, but I couldn't afford a lawyer to check it out." "Do you still have the paperwork?" I asked. "Yes, it should be somewhere in the records." "You won't mind if I ask my lawyer to look at it, will you? You have 7 years to fight these things." "I have my own issues. I'm a part-time teacher, so I don't earn much, and I haven't had a paycheck in 4 weeks because of the holidays. I can't handle all the bills." "If you need help getting through the holidays, I can assist," I offered. "I don't want your charity, Jeffrey." "Who said anything about charity? You could work for it. The closet is full of Rachel's dresses that I need to put away safely. Shoes, handbags, everything. I want to pack it up and send it to storage when I get permission. You can see the house could use some help. You can have it tidied up in the next 2 weeks. When you go back to teaching, I'll hire someone to clean for you." She looked at me with curiosity. "How much do you pay?" $30 an hour, I replied. "I don't enjoy cleaning my own house." "Okay, $40? She asked. "Nope, $35 and not a penny more." "Deal," she said with a smile. "I have one condition to make this work. You have to have dinner here again tomorrow." "I'm not sure about that. Maybe you just want me for something else." She frowned, her voice a bit rough and her face mostly hidden by her hood. Once again, she surprised me into silence. I pretended to be a fish, opening and closing my mouth a few times, but I still couldn't find the right words. Charlie burst into laughter and nearly fell out of her chair. I got up, feeling annoyed, and took the coffee cups to the dishwasher. She followed me, still giggling. "Here we go, Jeffrey," she teased in a playful voice. "I was just joking," she said, laughing again. "You'd better watch out. I might have a surprise for you." "Sure you can." She looked around nervously, surprised by my boldness. "I should go," she said, moving toward the front door. I followed her. She opened the door but paused before stepping out. "What time tomorrow? Suit yourself." I took a bunch of keys from the desk drawer in the hallway. "Here, take these. You can come and go as you please." She took them and turned to leave. "Charlie, I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't mean to make you feel strange. You know how to make a girl feel special? No, I meant to make you feel awkward. That's what I meant." She looked back at me, turned around, touched my arm, and kissed my cheek. "Good night, Jeffrey. I can see I'll have to keep an eye on you." Her smile came back. She left, and I finished cleaning up before heading to bed. The next morning, I was just finishing breakfast when the front door opened, and Charlie walked in dressed in old shorts covered in paint and a big shirt with rolled-up sleeves. I took her through the house to my ex-wife's closet. Then we went to the laundry room and found most of the cleaning supplies together. Finally, we headed to the garage, where I showed her a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. We used these when we moved the girls. They're easy to put together. I think I'll start with cleaning and do the clothes later. Okay? If you need anything, just give me a call. Oh, the air conditioning control is on the wall in the hallway. You might need it on a hot day. Thanks. I'll be fine. I turned to leave but came back. Charlie was having trouble with the vacuum cleaner. "Charlie, are you staying for dinner tonight? I mean, if you want to. You don't have to, of course." "Yes, that sounds fine, but keep your distance. I'm working now. I could say you're being rude to me." "Sure, I understand completely." Charlie laughed again at my awkwardness. "Get out of here, big guy. I've got work to do. I found the insurance papers last night. They're on the hall table. I left for work, like usual. But this time I was eager to get back home. I sent one of the girls from the office to Brian with Charlie's insurance letters and a note asking him to call me when he had a chance to look at them. I left work a bit early and stopped to buy flowers and a bottle of wine for dinner tonight. When I got home, I almost said, "Hi, honey, I'm home." But then I saw Charlie on her hands and knees in the shower. She was trying to scrub some tough stains from the grout between the tiles. When she looked up, she said, "You know, you don't pay me enough for this," wiping sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. I laughed and replied, "That's why I bring gifts. You should go pour me a glass of wine while I wash up. Then I'll join you in the kitchen." I went to the kitchen and poured her a glass of wine and got myself a beer. Just then, the phone rang. It was Brian. "Why aren't you at work? You never leave early." "I had something to do at home," I said, smiling at Charlie as she came in and took her wine. "I'm trying out a new vacuum cleaner." "How is that going?" Brian asked. "Not too bad. I could use more practice, though." Charlie gave me a thumbs up and pretended to head back to the shower. "If she does, let me know. My wife is looking for some help around the house." I nodded. "So, what's up, Brian?" "No problem. I got an email from the family court. Your hearing is set for a month from tomorrow." "Is that fast?" I asked, surprised. "It is. I guess Rachel's law firm is really pushing things along. I thought it would take at least 3 months." He continued, "We need to send them your financial statements and an independent appraisal of your home and business by the end of business on Wednesday next week. I'll work on it tomorrow and get it to you in a couple of days. Who's doing the appraisals?" "I have a person in mind. I'll talk to them tomorrow and they might want to reach out to you later this week." "Got it. Did you look at the insurance paperwork I sent you?" "Yes. It looks just like you thought. They're playing games. It's common for them to send rejection letters. Most people end up hiring a lawyer, and only a few believe the letters and keep the money." "So, what do we do? It's not too late, is it?" "No, you have 7 years to fight this. I'll write a strong letter with some legal threats, and they'll be willing to settle." "Great. Just add that time to my bill. I probably won't notice for a while," I said with a chuckle. "You're right about that." We said our goodbyes and hung up. Charlie came out of the bathroom looking fresh and wearing a light summer dress that suited her well. "Who knew you hadn't seen a woman like me before?" she joked as she walked over to me. "Not someone as pretty as you," I replied, watching her in the dress. "Remember what I said? Today I'm your worker. I could take you to court." "I remember you mentioning you couldn't afford a lawyer." "Okay, you caught me," she laughed. Charlie moved past me to the refrigerator and started taking out groceries. "Brian, the lawyer, looked over your papers and thinks he can help you get the life insurance money." "How?" she asked, trying not to care. "He thinks a strong letter should work. Insurance companies do this all the time. They often try to resist the first request. If they push back even a little, that's money they don't want to pay," I said, standing next to her. "That's awful!" she shouted, grabbing a carrot with a big knife. "Be careful," I warned. "These carrots aren't dangerous," Charlie said, but then she suddenly started crying. I wrapped my arms around her, and she stepped closer, hugging me tightly and resting her head on my chest. Her shoulders shook as she cried. I held her close and stayed quiet. When she stopped crying, she looked up at me. "I'm sorry. I haven't cried like that since John's funeral. I was trying to mourn my husband and help our son, and then they want to play these awful games." I wiped a few tears from her cheek. "It's okay. We'll get the money, plus some extra," I said softly. "I know, but it's the principle of it. Thanks for your help." Charlie stood on her toes, and we shared a brief kiss. After a moment, we smiled at each other and kissed again. When we stopped, I kept holding her close. Her head rested on my chest, and I placed my chin on top of her head. "Thank you, Jeffrey. I wish I could do more, but with David and everything." She sniffled and wiped her eyes. "I understand. We both have a lot going on. But we can still be friends, right?" "Yeah. Good friends?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "Yes." We held each other for a bit longer until Charlie pulled away. "The chicken is marinating in the fridge. Can you grab it for the barbecue? I'm starving." We had a wonderful dinner and spent the rest of the week talking about lighter topics. I kept my house clean and tidy, thinking of ways to see her again next week, but she seemed unsure. "I have to meet David tomorrow, and honestly, I've never had a male friend except relatives since John. I don't know how he'll react." "Can't you take a break from your life for a bit?" I asked. "I know, but I think it's too soon." "I'm sorry. That's not what I meant. Maybe you could both come over for some tea next weekend, just to see how it goes." "You're still married?" "Not really. Please, let's just keep things friendly." "I'll think about it. But please don't push me, Jeffrey." She walked away, and I felt ashamed for pushing Charlie. It wasn't fair. We had many challenges ahead. I decided to send her flowers the next day to apologize and gave her space for the following week. I was busy sorting out all my money details and getting my home and business valued. Suddenly, it was Friday. I hadn't heard from Charlie all week, and I started to think I had messed up. While I was having dinner at home, there was a knock at the door. It was Charlie. "Hi," she said. I replied, "Hi." We both paused for a moment. "Do you want to come in?" I asked, trying to fill the quiet. "No, I have to pick David up from cricket practice. I just stopped by to see if the offer for afternoon tea was still on." "Of course it is, but you don't have to come if it's too much for you," I said. She shook her head. "We'll be here. I've thought about it a lot, and I can't stay still forever. I can't promise anything. I don't know how David will feel, but I'll try." The next day, I slept well and then went to the bakery to buy a cake and some treats for our afternoon tea. When I got home for lunch, I had a roll and a salad, then went to my home office to get ready for the afternoon. I hadn't told Charlie the time and assumed it would be after cricket practice. Around 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I greeted Charlie with a quiet, "Hi," and she introduced her son, David. He was taller than I expected for a 13-year-old, with blonde hair like his mom's, but a different face shape. His strong jaw gave him a grown-up look, even though he still had the body of a skinny boy. He looked at me with a serious face, but shook my hand when I reached out. After showing them inside, I took them to a table on the porch that faced the garden. I poured a glass of wine for Charlie and me, and gave David a glass of ice water. He seemed serious, and gave his mother a disapproving look when I handed her the wine. It was clear he was taking care of things at home since his father's passing. I asked him how the cricket game had gone, but he only replied with one-word answers. Charlie looked annoyed and shifted in her seat, almost like she was ready to leave. It was time for me to try my plan. "David," I said, "I want to talk to you about something. I assume you know that your mom tidied up the house while you were at cricket camp." He nodded, and his mother gave me a curious look, wondering what I was up to. "I've realized something since then, and I need to discuss it with you." Charlie took a sip of her wine and, trying to interrupt me, coughed a bit. She probably thought I was going to declare my feelings. I smiled at her to encourage her, but it didn't ease the worry in her eyes. David, noticing his mother's reaction, became tense and looked at me sharply. "This is not about me," I said, waving my hand to indicate the garden and lawn. "Your mom mentioned you want to get a new cricket kit. Let's get together and work on this." David's serious look softened, and I could see a hint of interest in his eyes, helped along by his mother's sigh of relief. "Saba, I'm not sure what your schedule looks like, but I was hoping for a few hours during the day each week for $15 an hour." David smiled a little. "What will I be doing?" he asked. "Let's take a walk," I said as I stood up. The three of us walked around the garden, and I pointed out what needed to be pulled, raked, and cut. We ended up in the tool shed, where I opened the gate for the tools and the lawnmower. "When can I start?" David asked with excitement. "Whenever you'd like," I replied. "Would it be okay if I mowed the lawn today?" "That's fine, as long as your mom doesn't have to hurry," I said. Charlie smiled, and I showed David how to use the mower. He took his first lap, and then we went back to our drinks. I filled our glasses and sat down, feeling proud. Charlie waved to David as he passed by us. She looked at me and chuckled. "You really know how to surprise people, don't you?" I laughed too. Your face was priceless before I started laughing again. "Next time, it might help if you warned me," she said. "Okay, but only if there's a next time." I hoped so, and it seemed like we would see each other every week at least a few times. I felt really happy. I pulled an envelope from my pocket and handed it to Charlie. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up to the light. "Open it and see," I replied playfully. Charlie opened the envelope and peeked at the check inside. "I can't take this," she said firmly. "It's not a gift. It's just a way to help you pay off your house loan without interest. You can pay me back when you get your insurance money," I encouraged. "I still can't accept it," she repeated. "Please, I know how tough it is to pay interest to the bank. This is just to help a little bit." I had given similar loans to friends after my success. "But what if the insurance doesn't come through?" Charlie asked, looking for a reason to turn it down. "Then you can repay it just like any other loan. You'd make the same payments to cover the bank's interest. Right now, that's 6%. So each year, you'd pay 6% of the amount you borrowed. In 18 years, I'd get my money back and you'd be out of debt." She thought for a moment, so I picked up the check from the table and extended it to her. "Please take it. There's no reason to keep all this money if I can help my friends." Charlie accepted it, and then took my hand in hers. Good friends. I felt even happier when David finished working on the lawnmower. We set up 2 afternoon shifts for him, Monday and Wednesday. He would catch the bus after school to come to work, and Charlie would pick him up 2 hours later. For the first 2 weeks, I made sure to be there to show him what to do and to help him with the tools. On the first Wednesday, Charlie brought takeout food and we ate together until it was time for them to go. We decided that this would be our regular routine. The following week was just before the first meeting, so I stayed home late on both days. David was happy on Monday, but Wednesday felt different. When I got home, David and Charlie were at the dining table eating pizza. The sad feeling in the room made it feel heavy. I tried to smile and say hello, but it didn't really work. "David has something to tell you," Charlie said. "Seriously." David gave her a frustrated look, then turned it on me. "I'm not doing it again. Dinner or the garden?" I asked carefully. "All of it," he replied, getting up and getting ready to leave. "Can I ask why?" I carefully asked, trying to sound calm. "Because—" David looked at his mom, but she didn't say anything. He looked back at me, paused for a moment, and then went on. "Because I don't want a new dad. I have a dad, and I don't want some strange old guy around my mom." I wasn't surprised, and even though it hurt, I tried not to show it. He wasn't being mean. David had been there for his mom for 3 years. He had protected her and himself after a difficult time when their last relationship ended. It's your choice, David, and I respect it. We can talk about it. I can't replace your dad, and I wouldn't try to. And about being a strange old guy, that's your mom's choice. I think of her as a good friend who is helping me right now. He didn't flinch, which I expected. His hands were tight, but not in a bad way. We both looked at Charlie. She was still sitting, which I thought was a good sign, but I could see she was uncomfortable. Why don't we sit down and eat together? The pizza is getting cold, I suggested, hoping to lighten the mood. I'm done, David said, giving his mom a serious look. It seemed like he wanted her to get up from the table. She stayed seated, looking uneasy. Well, I'll wait in the car, he said, then ran out, slamming the front door. Charlie's face showed her anger, and I wanted to hug her, but I felt it wasn't the right moment. I sat down next to her and put my hand on her arm. It was my way of showing support and understanding, maybe just friendship. I could see she was close to tears. Do you know what made him act like this? I asked softly. No. None of his friends take the same bus that brings him here. He asked me when we were moving. Charlie tried to look at me, but I could tell she was about to cry. Okay, that makes sense. You might want to go talk to him. I don't want to be in the middle of this. It hurt to say it, but I knew it was best. I know, but why can't I have a say? She asked, her voice rising with anger. Maybe you can, but not when David is this upset. I'll be away next week for the divorce hearing, so let him calm down for a bit. I'll call you when I get back and we can go have coffee downtown. I could see she was relieved that I had given her an easy way out. Charlie got up, picked up her bag, and was almost out of the room when she paused. She came back and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Placing her hand on my shoulder, she smiled and said thank you. She squeezed my shoulder gently and left to find her son. I ate some cold pizza but didn't have much of an appetite. After cleaning up, I took a shower and went to bed. The next morning, it was pouring rain. I opened the bedroom curtain, saw the gloomy weather, and crawled back into bed. After lunch, I had a meeting with my lawyer. We were going to look at Rachel's financial report, which I had just received the day before, and plan for Wednesday's hearing. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about Charlie and David. I decided to get up, have breakfast, and put the laundry in the washer and then the dryer. Feeling bored, I grabbed my umbrella and went for a walk downtown. It was quiet for a Saturday, probably because of the rain. I walked into a cafe, ordered a coffee, and picked up a newspaper. I spent a nice hour going through the papers and had a simple lunch. I was waiting outside Brian's office when he arrived. Nothing to do this morning, Brian said cheerfully. Yeah, my social calendar is pretty empty right now, I replied. Looks like it, Brian said as he fumbled with his keys, trying to find the right one. He handed me a financial report to look over. It was short. The villa, which was bought for $5 million and then fixed up, was now worth $1.4 million, including furniture. A 75% share in a French real estate company was listed at $750,000. These were all assets. On the other side, there was a loan from a French bank for $400,000. It was shocking. $10 million had turned into $1.75 million in less than a year. Sharing that money was the best decision I ever made. Looking up, I noticed Brian watching me with a smirk. Incredible, isn't it? He said. Unbelievable, I responded, still stunned. It can't be real, I said, feeling shocked. Not really, but it shows why we got the report so late. You can't check those numbers in just 3 days, he replied. Shouldn't the numbers be checked by someone else? I said, putting the folder on the table in frustration. Yes, but our issue is that we don't have time to gather the proof we need to challenge it. Maybe we do. Mandy's mind was racing. What time is it in London? It must be the middle of the night there, she said. Brian checked his phone for a world clock app. I have a contact there who might help. I will call her later. Now let's focus on your defense. Do you still want me to make the offer? Brian asked. Yes, tomorrow at 4:45, so they'll only have 1 day to think about it. Still $4 million. I could tell he didn't like the offer, I said. Yeah, but they won't offer more than that, will they? Definitely. I think they'll want half of your assets, including the house and business, plus more for 20 years of work. Around 66.5 will be a good start. What do they all agree on? That's the main question. They laugh at 4. That's what I want. When we go before the judge, we should at least try to find some common ground tonight. But if we can't show that Rachel still has the money hidden away, the judge might think this is just a joke. It's worth a shot. If my contact in London can help, we might get some proof. Don't get your hopes too high. You don't have any dark secrets, do you? I don't like the way that sounds, Brian said with a frown. Do you really want to know? Or would it be better not to share? You must tell me. I need to know what to expect, and Rachel's lawyers are tough. All right, I want a little over 20 million, I said, feeling shy. How much more do you want? 10 million more. Brian looked shocked. And where is that money? Not under the bed, I hope. No, my sister has it. I gave her a third of it for safekeeping. What? Why isn't that on your financial statement? Well, it's technically not mine, and only she and I know about it. And now you know. Oh, and the lottery people paid her directly. I said she and I were in a group that won. And where is that money now? Brian was losing his cool. It's in an investment company run by my sister. I'm a director there, and it's listed in my financial report, which shows all the companies I work with. Brian picked up the folder with my report and started flipping through it. He pointed to page 4. You missed Cal Putney. What are these companies? Many of my rural clients run their businesses as family-owned. They like having an outside director to help with family issues. I don't get paid, but I manage the accounting. Are there any other multi-million-dollar companies nearby? Haven't you tried to buy a farm recently? All of them are worth millions. The biggest one, Jonesboro, is valued at about 40 million. They also have a transportation side to their business. He rubbed his chin and looked at me over his glasses. I'm curious why you included that list if you say you don't get paid as a director. You're hiding in plain sight, and I'll have to keep an eye on you. I didn't think you were so clever. There's nothing to hide. It's my sister's money. I'm just keeping the records, I said with a smile. Is that your official job? Do you have proof that this group exists? Yes. I have the winning ticket showing the time and date of purchase, plus phone records that show I spoke to my sister right before. I said with some hope, but not too much certainty, that we could make it work. Is that why you're offering 4 million? I just want to settle this quickly. How much more are you willing to go? 5. That wouldn't be too much if I'm in a good mood. Maybe 5.5, but not a penny more. I had to push back the sadness that was creeping in. Talking about splitting a long marriage over money made me feel wistful. All right, I think I understand what you want. That's enough for today. Talk to your friend in London as soon as you can. Let me know if you find anything helpful. I won't be in the office on Tuesday, but you can reach me on my cell phone. I'll see you early Wednesday morning at family court, said Brian, standing up and shaking my hand. I shook it back. Do you want to go watch the soccer game at the pub? I asked, trying not to sound too eager. I'd love to, but my daughter and her fiancé are coming over for dinner. I should head home. Don't worry, I'll see you Wednesday, I replied as I walked toward the door. Just one thing before you go. Try not to look too fancy on Wednesday, Brian said. I turned back, confused. You know, leave the expensive suit at home. Come on, Brian, you should know me better than that. I might have some money saved up, but I'm still careful with it. Like I'm going to spend that much on a suit, Brian shrugged. Just dress simply. Okay, I'll see you Wednesday. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sun was shining through the clouds. I walked home, amazed at how the rain made everything around me shine. The lawns and plants seemed to grow right before my eyes. The dust and dirt were washed away from the sidewalks. Everything around me felt new and fresh. I wished my problems could be wiped away just as easily. In the evening, around the time the sun was rising in London, I called Mandy. The sun might have been up, but Mandy wasn't there. I left 2 messages for her to call me back. Just before I was about to go to bed, she called back. Hi there, she said playfully. Hi, Mandy, I replied more seriously. Oh, so this isn't just a friendly call. I was excited to hear from you this morning, she said. Too bad. I have a favor to ask you. Since it's Sunday, you know this call costs extra, she giggled, still sounding a bit tired from the night before. I wouldn't expect anything less, I replied, feeling a bit weary. Well, you're not being very fun this evening, are you? It's late here. I'm sleepy. All right, then. What do you need? Mandy stopped joking around. I need you to look into the company that appraised Rachel's house and handled her investment with Jack. Okay. What's the issue? She asked seriously. I think it's a mess. The house was appraised for less than what she paid for it, and the investment with Jack is only listed at $750,000. I want to know what happened to the rest of the money. All right, when do you need this? Mandy asked. The divorce hearing is Wednesday morning, so I would need it by Tuesday night, I said. Mandy laughed. You're dreaming! There's no way I can have it by then. I know, but could you at least check the appraisal company? They might be shady or connected to Jack. Please find me something. There was a pause. I'll see what I can do. That's all I can promise. I'm only helping because I know you have money. She laughed again. I gave her the name of the company and said I would email her the report right away. After that, we said goodbye and hung up on Tuesday afternoon. I couldn't focus on my work. I called the hotel where I was supposed to stay the next night to change my plans and stay that night too. I left work 2 hours early and told the receptionist to keep my messages until I came back, which I hoped would be Thursday. At home, I grabbed my bag that I had packed the day before and began the 2-hour drive to Bathurst, the closest town with family court hearings. Since family court is a federal court, most hearings take place in state capitals or Canberra. Some earlier hearings are held in smaller towns, and luckily, Bathurst could fit us into their schedule for tomorrow. Brian told me that if the case moved forward and Rachel kept pushing for a quick hearing, we might have to travel further if the appeal went in front of 3 judges. That would mean going to either Sydney or Canberra. I arrived at the motel, got my keys, and made plans to have dinner at the restaurant that evening. I pulled up the blinds, lay down, and tried to sleep. The phone rang, and I looked at the screen hoping it was Mandy, but it wasn't. Hey, Jeffrey, where are you? Charlie asked, sounding worried. I checked your house and office after work, but you weren't there. I'm at Bathurst. I couldn't focus on work, so I decided to come early, I replied. Did something happen? No. I just wanted to wish you luck. I guess since you help people going through a divorce, I thought I should tell you I'm thinking of you tomorrow. She sounded excited, and for once the focus was on her. Thank you. That's nice to hear. Then there was a quiet moment, and I tried to break the silence. How's David? Fine. He's still a typical moody teenager, but he's okay. There was something tense in her voice. I have some reading to do, so I'll talk to you later. I felt distant, and maybe I was pushing her away too. Deep down, I wanted her with me, but I didn't want to risk everything and stay in this uncertain space. Will you let me know what happens? Will I get to see you when you get home? A flood of thoughts rushed through my mind, but I struggled to find the right words. Jeff, are you there? I could hear a hint of worry in her voice. She had opened up to me. I made up my mind. Yeah, I'm just busy. I'll call you tomorrow night and let you know what happened. Then we can set a time to meet. Great. We'll talk tomorrow. I could hear her smile. I lay down and surprisingly fell asleep and missed my dinner reservation. Later, the room phone rang. It was the front desk asking if I was okay. I replied that I was and requested something to be brought to my room. After having dinner, I spent a few hours watching TV, waiting for a call from Mandy, but it never came. I woke up again at 3 in the morning and the TV was still on. I tried to sleep for hours, but I couldn't stop worrying about what would happen in court. Today was the day. I had some ideas about what it might be like. I imagined a scene like those in movies, with a judge up high and lawyers facing each other in a big wooden room filled with empty chairs. Instead, it looked more like a small meeting room with tables set up in a U-shape. There was a kettle for hot drinks and coffee on one wall and a court reporter setting up her equipment on the other. Everything seemed plain, except for a nicer chair at the front, which I guessed was for the judge. We still followed some court rules as we sat across from each other, where Rachel and Jack tried hard not to look at me. The court clerk asked us to stand, and then the judge, a woman in her middle years, walked in and took her seat in the comfortable chair. Once we sat back down, she opened a folder she had brought and laid out some papers in front of her. Let's begin, the judge said, looking at me from her folder. I believe you're Jeffrey Blake? I nodded, and then she turned to Rachel. And you're Rachel? She nodded back. Okay, now this all seems a bit rushed. Are you sure there's no chance for us to work things out later? I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to speak first, but her lawyer stood up right away. Your Honor, I'm Nigel Kerr from the firm Waters, Anderson, Nelson, and Kerr. I'll be representing Mrs. Blake in this case. The judge shot him a stern look and motioned for him to sit down. I had to hold back a laugh. I had written down the name of the law firm earlier, and only then did I realize what the initials spelled out. I know who you are, Nigel. I just don't understand why you're here, the judge said. Nigel sat down looking annoyed. I want to clarify that this is not a fight. This meeting is meant to be less formal. It usually needs little input from lawyers like you. Indeed. I'm curious why you thought it was necessary to show up, the judge said, giving him a sharp look, then glancing around at the tables. The purpose of this meeting is to help both parties reach an agreement without the costs and delays of a full court trial. I'm here to mediate, she explained. Often, lawyers can complicate things. With all due respect, Your Honor, Mrs. Blake asked me to speak for her because she doubts her ability to explain her side, Nigel responded. It felt like they were two rams butting heads, staring each other down. The judge, looking a bit unsettled, focused back on her notes. All right, Mr. Kerr, I'm going to ask your client some straightforward questions, and I want her to respond first. Barrister Rachel took her seat, looking pleased with herself. Brian introduced himself and then sat down again. The judge took a sip of water before looking at her notes. I see you've only been separated for 2 months, she said. She looked at me, then at Rachel. That's not a long time. It's quite unusual to be here without being apart for at least a year. Is there really no chance for you two to get back together? After she spoke, she focused on me. I answered, He's gone too far to turn back now. The judge shifted her focus to Rachel. It's over. Rachel leaned closer to Jack. We should note that Mr. Blake left his family in France on Christmas Eve. Nigel tried to chime in with his thoughts, but got reprimanded. Mr. Kerr, that's exactly the kind of comment we don't need in this trial. Remember, this is still a court of law, and I can hold you in contempt. You've been warned. She smiled, and I started to like her. Nigel looked a bit embarrassed, so the judge opened one of the folders beside her. Since the people involved are adults, this is about dividing property. I have your statement, Mr. Blake, and I need to clarify some details. I noticed 3 large withdrawals around a year ago that were listed as gifts. Yes, I said. They were gifts to my daughters. Are they all married? I nodded. That explains the different last names. I joked that you might have a harem, but no one laughed. She continued. Also, around the same time, you withdrew about $1.5 million in different amounts, which you called loans. I can't find any repayments. Can you explain? Yes. I have given some friends interest-free loans. They pay me back once a year, so the first payments will start coming in soon. The judge leaned back in her chair, looking at me over her glasses. These are proud people. They don't like accepting gifts. So you expect payments over 10 years? If they owe you 10% interest each year, they'll pay it off eventually, right? There was a bit of sarcasm in her voice, but she seemed satisfied with my answer. It seems pretty straightforward, she said. I understand you've offered to settle for $4 million. Is that right? Yes. How did you come up with that amount? I looked at my bank account and added $1 million for Rachel's share of the business tied to our home. The judge turned in her chair and focused on Rachel. I see you think this offer is not enough, the judge said. Yes, Your Honor, Rachel replied quietly. May I speak, Your Honor? Asked Nigel, sounding annoyed. Of course, the judge said. Mrs. Blake has dedicated 30 years to her husband while he built his career. She took care of him and their children. Now he has a successful business and she has no other way to support herself. This offer, while seemingly generous, does not reflect what she has given. I felt tense and my fists tightened. Brian nudged me with his elbow and gave me a look to remind me to relax. The judge paused for a moment, closed my folder and opened another one. She pulled out some handwritten notes. Now might be a good time to review Mrs. Blake's statement and then discuss settlement options. Yes, Your Honor, Nigel said, opening his folder and showing he was ready to respond to questions. Ignoring him, the judge focused on Rachel. A year ago, there was $1 million in a bank account in your name, right? She asked. Yes, Rachel said nervously. And now you are $400,000 in debt? Yes, Rachel squeaked. Nicole cleared his throat, and the judge turned to look at him. He raised his hand to speak. If you must, Mr. Kerr, but don't make me regret it, the judge warned. No, Your Honor, he began. Europe is facing a big recession, and property values are dropping. My client asked her husband for some money to help with Christmas, and he said no. Nigel smirked at me. I felt like sticking my tongue out at him, but I didn't. The judge quickly shut down his grin with her next words. Given her situation, that doesn't surprise me. Brian and I shared a quiet laugh. Mr. Kerr, since you seem to know so much about the recession in Europe, can you explain something? The judge asked. How is it that, after spending $1.25 million on a house, your client claims it's now worth less than that? Nigel looked down at his notes and shifted uncomfortably. He seemed more accustomed to attacking than defending. Your Honor, the recession has hurt luxury real estate, he replied. I get that. But wasn't there a downturn when Mrs. Blake was purchasing property? The judge asked, sharing my disbelief. I can only base my answers on the values from a reputable appraisal company, he replied. Slowly, he shifted tactics. Let's look at 2 payments of $2.5 million each for a 75% stake in an investment company that's valued at only $750,000. How can you justify $5 million for something worth only $750,000? That seems hard to believe, the judge pressed. I can only remind you, Your Honor, that a well-known appraisal company made those estimates. Nigel looked uncomfortable. The judge nodded and closed the folder. She glanced at her watch and then stacked the folders again. It's 11 o'clock and I have another case. We'll take a break now. We'll meet again in 2 hours at 1 o'clock to hear your settlement ideas, the judge said. Mrs. Blake, I suggest you talk with your legal team about the settlement offer. I believe it's a good one. The judge stood up, and we followed her out the door. Rachel and Jack stayed with their legal team while Brian and I watched them after a quick chat. Rachel, Jack, Nigel, and his junior lawyer left, leaving the lawyer with the briefing to approach us. $4 million is not enough. We think 7 is a better number. He didn't wait for an answer and walked out with the others, leaving us surprised. I looked at Brian, and he shrugged. At least we know they will challenge whatever the judge decides. If I'm correct, she won't grant anything close to 7. We have some time to fill. Want to grab a bite to eat? I asked. Oh, yes, especially if you're paying, he replied. We left the courthouse and walked down the street until we found a nice cafe. We took a table there. I checked my phone and saw I had 5 missed calls and 2 texts. I had turned it to silent mode during the hearing. I saw it was Mandy calling, but I didn't read the messages. Instead, I dialed her number. When a sleepy voice answered, I realized it was midnight. I'm sorry for calling so late, I whispered. That's fine. I was trying to stay awake, she said with a yawn. I have something that might help you. Great. What did you find? I asked, trying to sound calm. The appraisal company that did the estimates is not trustworthy. I didn't spot it right away, but my investigator caught it quickly. There's a good valuation company called KTLA Valuations based in Paris, and it's one of the top 8 in France. However, the appraisals you got are from Capella Valuations. They nearly copied another company's logo with only small changes. It's meant to look real? I asked. Exactly. We looked into Capella Valuations and found an old friend's name. I'm guessing it's Jacques? My throat felt tight. Right. It's him and one of his cousins from Belgium. The cousin is the one who signed the appraisals. I suspected as much. That didn't seem legit. It gets even funnier. Want to guess what the cousin does? I stayed quiet, not knowing. He's a butcher, she laughed, but I didn't find it funny. Can you send me the proof? I asked. Already sent it. You should see it in your inbox, she replied. I never bought an iPad. I guess I'll have to connect to the internet at the courthouse. Did I make it on time? Not really. Our first meeting was at 10 o'clock, but we need to go before the judge again in about an hour and a half. How are things going? I think it's good. I looked at Brian across the table, and he gave me a thumbs up. Let me know how it goes. But next time, wait until a better time. We both laughed, said goodbye, and hung up. I opened my email on my phone, and Brian looked at me, waiting. Please don't leave me hanging, buddy. What did your contact find out? It turned out just like we thought. The estimates are all wrong. I have some proof in my email, but I can't print it. Do you think we can find a place to make a copy? I asked, feeling frustrated while trying to read the documents on my phone. Remember Bomber Johnson from high school? I nodded, still fiddling with my phone. He works at a bank around here somewhere. I'll try to reach him. If that doesn't work, we can check the sheriff's office at the courthouse. I wanted to stand up from the table, but he motioned for me to sit. We still have lots of time. Let's eat first, he said, looking at the menu. We ordered, and I quickly started eating, which only made me more annoyed as Brian took his time enjoying each bite. The waiter came over to clear our plates and asked if we wanted to see the dessert menu. I shot a look at Brian, telling him not to push it, and we decided to find Bomber Johnson. It didn't work out, but the kind clerk at the sheriff's office let me use her computer. We made 3 copies of Mandy's report. It was very detailed and included different forms, names, and a letter from the real appraisal company saying they were not involved. There were also documents from the shady company with signatures from Jax and his cousin, plus pictures of the cousin in his butcher shop. We got back to the meeting room 5 minutes early. The other side was already waiting at the door. We stood a little way off. Rachel didn't try to come closer, and neither did I. The court clerk opened the door. We went in and sat down to wait for the judge. 5 minutes later, the judge walked in and took a seat in a comfy chair. "All right, how did the talks go?" "We made a counteroffer and got no reply," Nigel said with a bit of an attitude. The judge looked at us. We shook our heads and she turned back to Nigel. "Can I ask about the offer?" $7 million, he replied casually. The judge sighed sharply. "You're really not taking this seriously, are you?" "Okay then. You both have 4 minutes to give your final statement, and then I'll make my decision. Heads or tails?" "Who goes first, Mr. Kerr? It's up to you." The judge flipped a coin and caught it. Nigel called heads, but it was tails. We chose to go second, and Nigel, looking upset, stood up to speak. He talked a lot about Rachel, her hard work for her family and community, how she gave up her job to take care of her kids and do volunteer work. He mentioned her wish to explore the world and my hesitance to leave Australia. He touched on Christmas briefly, but the judge's serious expression stopped that topic quickly. In conclusion, he argued that because of her sacrifices, it would be fair for her to receive most of my bank account since she could no longer earn money. I watched this with a blank face, but inside I was very angry. I couldn't wait for Brian to get up and present Mandy's case. Brian stood up and handed a copy to the judge, and then Nigel began to respond. "Your Honor, in the last hour we received a report from an investigative company in London. We have serious doubts about the trustworthiness of the numbers from Mrs. Blake's legal team." Well, after the deadline, Nigel jumped up quickly. "Your Honor, this report cannot be accepted now. We have no way to check the truth of all the claims in it," he shouted. The judge did not open the folder and looked at it suspiciously. "If this were a jury trial, I would not allow new evidence to be shown without letting the defense look at it first. However, I'm a judge, and I can be fair. I know when I'm being tricked. Your Honor, you're giving us a reason to appeal. Right, Nigel?" "I'm aware of that, and I've known since I noticed your actions in this hearing. Besides, I want to read this, as I believe Rachel's financial report is so incomplete that it almost seems misleading." "I'll allow it, just because I'm curious to see what it says," the judge said as she motioned for Brian to continue. Brian read through the entire document. There were similar names, a letter from a real estate company, and then some pictures at the end. He mentioned that the $4 million offer still stood, but the $7 million one was too much. When he finished, the judge looked over the file again, then leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. She gave both sides a sharp look, leaned forward, and wrote a few notes. "Thank you for the summary. It backed up what I already thought about this case. It seems to me that the preparation for this hearing was, at the very least, careless and sloppy, and at worst, could be seen as dishonest." As she said this, she looked right at Nigel. He tried to say something, but ended up staying silent. Luckily, I got a clear understanding from one of the parties, and that really changed my decision. I realized that the money from the lottery was shared equally between the two spouses, which meant their finances were split. Rachel sighed as she understood what this meant for her. The only other things left to decide were the family home in Australia and the accounting business. Since the value of these things wasn't argued by the other side, I believe Mr. Blake should give Mrs. Blake $1 million. Mrs. Blake also needs to pay $50,000 every year until she passes away or starts living with another partner. Rachel was quietly crying. Jack stood nearby, waving his hands and muttering a curse in French. The lawyer tried to help her, but the sound just got louder. Brian gave me a reassuring pat on the back, but I knew this wasn't the end. Nigel stood up. "Your Honor, thank you for your time," he said, sounding very sarcastic. "I need to tell you that we plan to appeal this decision to the family court. We believe you made several legal mistakes and showed clear bias against my client from the start. That's your choice. But I must warn you that there's $4 million at stake without the extra cost of a full hearing," he added. "In my opinion, the chances of a better result are low." The judge looked at Rachel, who was still sniffling. "We ask that you process your order for payment so my client has money to get by until the full court hearing." Nigel continued, without noticing the judge had turned toward his client. "Mr. Blake, you have 14 days to give $1 million. This money will count in any future decision. Mrs. Blake, I suggest that you handle this money more carefully than you did with the last $10 million, he said, which made her cry again. The court clerk then told everyone to stand up. The judge left, and the arguing began. Rachel and Jack were deep in conversation with their lawyers. I glanced at Brian, who looked unhappy. "Round one is on us," he said with a forced smile. "Do you have money in the bank?" I asked. "Yeah, but how are we going to pay them?" Brian looked towards the lively discussion across the room. "Not directly. We'll give it to the court, and they'll send it. This way, there will be proof the money has been given. Should we offer the $4 million again?" I suggested. "I wouldn't rush it. They know where to find you if they change their minds." We left and completed the paperwork at the front desk. The sun had gone down, and a cold wind started to blow. Dark clouds gathered over the hills near Bathurst. I wondered if this was a sign of trouble ahead. After shaking Brian's hand, I headed to my car, wanting to get home before it was completely dark. Kangaroos on the road can be a real problem. As I drove, I went over the day's events in my mind. I really wanted everything to be settled today. I called Brian, and I could hear the ringing in the car. "Didn't we just say goodbye 30 minutes ago?" Brian's voice came through my car's speaker. "I was thinking maybe I should just pay $7 million to make it all go away." "No way. If you do that, they'll just ask for 10 next time. You have control here. Don't let them push you." "Okay. I just didn't enjoy today, you know?" I found it hard to say that I did not want to go back to court. "Don't worry, buddy. You won today. It could have been much worse. Go home, have a beer, and celebrate." Then the call ended, leaving me alone with my thoughts again. Maybe this is what I had been afraid of. Coming home to a dark, empty house. Not the best place for a celebration. I kept driving, feeling down about how things had come to this point. I got home before 5, so I stopped by the office to see if anything needed my attention while I was away. Everything was fine. After checking my messages quickly, I went out to get something for dinner. The street, which had been busy a week ago, was quiet this afternoon. People hurried to their cars, shivering in the cold wind. The chill in the air reminded everyone that winter was coming, even though it was still a nice 19 degrees Celsius. It's funny how a day like this at the end of winter usually gets people excited for summer. Short sleeves and t-shirts were pulled out, celebrating the return of warm weather. I bought some frozen dinners and fruit, then headed home. I opened the door to let fresh air in. After putting my lunches for the week in the freezer, I went outside to the garden. The lawn needed mowing again, and if David didn't want to do it anymore, I'd have to find someone else. I walked around the rose bushes, picking off the annoying flowers and pulling out weeds that had grown through the mulch. Then the doorbell rang, and I walked slowly through the house to answer. Looking through the side window, I saw Charlie standing there in her workout clothes, sweaty from exercise. "Hi," she said, catching her breath. "I was just jogging by, saw your car, and thought I'd stop in. Would you like to come in? Can I offer you a drink?" I was surprised that her house was quite far away. Reading my concern, she smiled and said, "No, I'm fine. I just came from the main street where I had a gym class. I didn't realize how steep the hill was to get up here." "Come on in," I said, encouraging her. "No, I don't want to intrude. I just wanted to check in on how you were today." Charlie moved to the side and leaned against the doorframe. Sadly, this was just the first step. My lawyer told me we did well. But as they say, it's not just about winning a small fight. It's about winning the whole match. The stress must have shown on my face or in how I acted. Charlie came closer and placed her hand on my shoulder. Suddenly, I really wanted to hug her, so I wrapped my arms around her. I don't know if it was the stress from the divorce or my bottled-up feelings, but I ended up jumping onto the bed with her. After a bit, Charlie checked her clothes to make sure everything looked right. Then she quietly opened the door and walked out without saying anything. I felt excited, shy, worried, and sad all at once. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of feelings. I tried calling Charlie, but she never picked up. During the weekend, I drove by her place, but her car was gone and she wasn't there. On Sunday, I spent my time in the yard, mowing the grass and pulling weeds, feeling pretty miserable. On Monday at work, I got an email from Brian asking me to call him when I could. I had some time, so I called right away. "What's up?" I asked after we exchanged our usual greetings. "You have a meeting coming up in 3 weeks at family court," Brian said. "I don't know how they got this far, but they seem to have some real power. These cases usually take a long time." "That's okay," I replied cheerfully. "I just want this to be over. What's a preliminary hearing?" "It's a review. The judges need to decide if there are good reasons for this appeal before we get to hear all the arguments," Brian explained. "And what are those reasons?" I asked. "Basically, what Rachel said at the last meeting, that the judge made a mistake and took action too early, and that she was unfair to their client." "What does full court mean?" I asked. "It means 3 judges, one of whom is the head judge or the deputy head judge." "So what do we do now?" "Nothing for now. We just show up and listen. They made an appeal, so they'll need to state their case. If it goes forward, then we'll move on to the next steps, where there will be witnesses and other details to sort out. I can help with getting things ready, but it's best to have a barrister handle the hearing," Brian added. "Why can't she just take the money I offered and go away?" I said, almost shouting into the phone. My frustration was clear. Brian replied calmly, "It's really about greed, and it's not just on Rachel's side. The others know how much will be involved, and they want their share." "Those guys are the worst," I said with anger. "Stay calm, Jeffrey. We're still in this." "I know. I just don't understand why it has to be so difficult." "That's often how things go with family matters," Brian said. I said half-jokingly that it might be a good time to end our chat for now. "Talk later, Jeff." I leaned back in my chair and thought about everything happening around me. I didn't like it. I'm not a control freak, but I prefer to plan ahead. It felt like my marriage was further away than ever. I still had some financial help from my sister, but everything else felt uncertain. And then there was my personal life. Coming home to an empty house made me feel more and more lonely. Charlie. She was beautiful, lively, and fun, but she had a lot of issues too. Maybe I should have just retired and traveled with Rachel. That would be better than this. Jack wouldn't check on me if I wasn't coming home from work. Things could have been different. I could have kept Rachel from spending too much money. I slapped myself lightly. "Wake up, Jeff. Everything went wrong before this. It's time to move on. The past is the past, and I can't change it. I should focus on the future, right?" I told myself out loud. "What's done is done. I need to start moving forward." I pulled out a notepad from my drawer and wrote some points at the top of the page. My first priority? Charlie. I liked her. Maybe even more than I thought. I was going through a divorce soon, so I wouldn't waste time feeling sorry for myself. Second, I need to leave the family home, sell it, rent it out, maybe even knock it down. There were too many memories and it would be too much work. I wanted something smaller, newer, and easier to take care of. Third, I wanted to get out and enjoy myself. Yes, I liked my job, but really, I was just using it to stay away from Rachel. I had a great team that could handle things without me. It was time for some fun, fishing in the Kimberley, skiing in Canada, diving in the Great Barrier Reef. So many exciting adventures. Of course, if the first priority with Charlie works out, I might need to adjust my plans a bit. That was enough to get me started, so I didn't add anything else to the list. I went back to work, stepping away now and then to think and dream, smiling for the first time in a long while. At the end of the day, I rushed out of the office to get to the nursery before it closed. Our little town didn't have a flower shop, but it did have a big nursery that sold plants to other shops. There was a small store where you could buy things for cash. I drove there and bought a potted red rose that was still blooming. Then I went to Charlie's house, but she wasn't home. I called her number, hoping for an answer. After a few rings, she picked up. We exchanged greetings, and suddenly I realized I didn't know how to start the conversation about the other day. I just wanted to say, thankfully, she jumped into the chat and saved me from my awkward attempt at talking. "Can we talk later? I'm just busy," Charlie said quietly. "Yeah, sure, we're still friends, right?" I asked, my voice sounding a bit desperate. "We just need to clear some things up," she replied. "I'll try to come back later this afternoon, okay?" She picked her words carefully. "Yeah, great. I'll be here. Not like last time. I'll behave this time," I joked. I was almost giggling, but she held it in. "Goodbye, Jeffrey." When I got home, I rushed to take a shower and change my clothes. I looked in the mirror and changed again. After I felt ready, I put a bottle of wine on ice and sat down to wait. I flipped through the local newspaper on the front lawn and checked a few emails on my iPad. An hour and a half later, I had just about given up and was heating up a frozen dinner when the doorbell rang. I almost ran to the door but kept myself to a quick walk. It was Charlie, and she was holding a white box. I opened the door. She smiled a little nervously at me, and I stepped back to let her in. We went to the kitchen, and she set the box on the table. She opened it and turned it toward me. Inside was a cake. "So it's a peace offering. I'm sorry I haven't returned your calls," she said, looking down shyly. I pointed to the flowers on the dining room table. "This is my peace offering, and I'm sorry for my outburst that day." We stood on either side of the kitchen counter, a neutral spot. Charlie glanced at the flowers and then back at me. "I don't think you were the only one upset," she said, giving a small smile. "Can I offer you a drink? Wine, coffee, or water?" I asked, trying to be a good host. "Wine would be nice," she replied. I poured 2 glasses and carried them into the living room, handing her one. I wasn't sure where to sit. I felt like I should sit across from her, but I chose to sit next to her instead. "I have something to say," I started. We both spoke at once and then stopped. I raised my hand. "Can I go first?" I asked, feeling like I needed to say my piece quickly. Charlie nodded. "I've been thinking a lot the last few days. I really like you. Even more than that. I've been looking for excuses. My messy divorce, the fact that you lost your husband and have a teenage son, and the age difference. But I've decided that doesn't matter. I don't want to miss the chance to be with you because of what-ifs." Charlie touched my hand. She smiled, and I felt my eyes well up with tears. "You're a wonderful woman, and you deserve more than a boring old accountant like me. But I would love for us to try. I think we could be great together." I didn't cry, but I really wanted to. It felt like I was sharing something huge about my feelings for the first time. "Are you done?" Charlie asked. I nodded. She placed her hand on my cheek to comfort me. Since John passed away, I hadn't felt anything for other men. The idea of being with someone else felt like I was betraying him, and even worse, my son. Last week, I faced some feelings I had been trying to keep down. It frightened me deeply. I needed time to think clearly. So I took David and we rented a small cottage by the sea. He was really angry. A sad smile crossed Charlie's face as she remembered. David had a sports event he wanted to attend. That's when I realized he has more of a life than I do. I just work, cook, and drive him around. What about my life? That day you took me to the races was the first time I did something just for me since John passed. Did you know his clothes are still in our closet? I shook my head. Charlie was getting more upset. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew she needed to talk. That's how I spent my day off. I went through his things, sorting them into piles. David's, charity, and trash. It was tough, but I found something special. A letter he must have written before he went to the hospital for the last time. She took out the crumpled note, tears flowing down her face. She handed it to me, and I carefully opened it. "My dear, I left this for you to find when it was time to move on. I didn't want to give it to you earlier because you might think I was giving up. You've kept me going for 2 years, longer than the doctors thought. But I'm a realist, and I think my time is near. I wrote this note to tell you how much I love you. I haven't always shown it. And as a man, I'm awful at saying it. I was so lucky to share the last 10 years with you. Don't grieve for me too long. You are such a wonderful person who deserves happiness after all the tough times you've faced. Someone out there will make you smile and laugh again like you used to. David will need a father figure someday. I know you're a great mom and will be fine alone, but don't be scared to try again. I want you to know I was happy at the end of my days. I wish I could have grown old with you, but it wasn't meant to be. I'm just glad I got to spend so much time with a wonderful person. Love, John. Tears filled my eyes. Charlie was still crying. We hugged tightly and let it all out. She pulled back first, taking a deep breath. I'm sorry. I never really knew what I wanted to say. This weekend I decided I want to live my life. When I got home, the house felt like a tribute to John, so I started to pack up his things. Then I found a note and something in his words really hit me. She took the note from my hands and opened it again. Somewhere in there, someone will make you smile and laugh again. She looked at me and said, You made me smile and laugh again, even when I was down and cleaning your bathroom before school. I always looked forward to you coming home and sharing meals. So I guess what I'm saying is that I want us to make this work too. We hugged tightly for a long time. I kissed her hair and quietly said, You know we're both a bit nervous. A lot of relationships don't last because of that. Try not to worry so much. You sound like a boring accountant. She giggled. Hey, I'm the only one who can call myself old, I joked. Okay, then I'll call you experienced, she teased back. We kissed, but it was a gentle peck on the lips. Charlie glanced at her watch. Oh no, I have to go. David's rugby practice is almost over. She stood up to leave, but I held her hand. Are you free Friday night? I asked. No, you're taking me to a great place for dinner. I smiled. She looked pleased. Have you told David about this yet? I remembered our talk on the way home from the coast. I told him that I would always love his father, but since he's gone, I'm ready for a new relationship. And what did he say? I asked, curious. Like all teenagers, he shrugged and said he didn't care. Then he asked if I had someone in mind, and I told him to stay out of it. I let go of her hand, and she leaned over to kiss my forehead. I'll see you Friday, she said with a wave as she walked away, leaving me happy but alone. I strolled to the microwave and realized the frozen dinner was beyond saving, so I tossed it and picked up another one. The next day, I made a reservation at a nice restaurant for Friday night. I felt so happy, whistling and smiling. My coworkers were giving me strange looks. What's gotten into you? Asked Julie as she bought me coffee. What do you mean? I replied with a grin. The whistling, the laughter, your overall good mood. Not that you weren't happy, but you're the happiest you've been in years. She adjusted her glasses, studying me. Julie had been with me for 20 years. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. That's exactly it, she said. You're not planning to do anything crazy, are you? I've heard people can be really happy before they, hurt themselves. Her voice wavered, as if she felt she had said too much. I kept smiling and said, Don't worry, Julie, I'm okay. Really, I'm doing great. I'm moving forward, that's all. Did she accept your settlement offer? She asked. Julie always knew all the latest news and liked being the first to hear about everything. I wasn't worried about it anymore. What will happen will happen. I just want to enjoy life while I can. Are you sure? Julie asked with a doubtful look. Yeah, I'm sure. Now get back to work before I get grumpy again. I laughed. She gave me a funny look and went back to her desk, shaking her head. After work, I walked home feeling good that everything was okay. As I turned toward my house, I saw a dark figure sitting on the front steps. It was David, wearing his school uniform and with his bag beside him. He stood up when I got closer, pausing a little distance away, and I was unsure what to say. He looked just as nervous, so I broke the silence. Hi, David. It was simple, but better than nothing. Hi, he responded in a typical teenage way. Do you need something? I asked. Maybe, he mumbled. I kept quiet, and after a short pause, he said, Are you dating my mom? It felt more like he was stating a fact than asking a question. Yes, I hope to see your mom a lot more, I replied. He added, I was wondering if you needed help in the garden. That was a relief. Yes, that would be great, I said cheerfully. But I still want to get paid, David replied, not as excited as I was. I smiled, feeling lucky. I can start tomorrow if you want. 2 days a week is okay, but 3 would be even better. I'm thinking of cleaning it up and then selling it, I said as I walked toward the front door. Sell it? He looked disappointed. Why do you want to sell it? He turned to look at the house. I stood with him and took in my home. It has a lot of memories, David. It's big and old, and it needs a lot of work. Not all memories are bad, he said with deep feeling. I know, but sometimes they hold you back. They can stop you from moving on. I noticed he sniffled, realizing we were talking about different memories. Looking at David, I saw his eyes were getting watery, so I put my arm around his shoulders. I'm sorry, David. I was talking about my own memories, not your dad. He will always be with you because he's in your heart. I touched his head briefly, and then his chest. No one can replace him. I would never try. I really like your mom, and I wish I could be closer to both of you. David stepped away from me, wiped his eyes with his sleeve, and picked up his bag from the ground. I'll start tomorrow afternoon, he said quietly as he moved toward the driveway. Do you need a ride home? I called after him, but he just waved and didn't respond. I walked into the house and then my phone rang. It was Charlie. You haven't seen David? He hasn't come home. When I called his friend, they said he got on the bus that goes near your house. There was worry in her voice. Yes, he was just here and he just left. Oh, how did it go? She was still worried, but not too much. He wanted his job back as a gardener. I tried to calm her down. Really? That's it? I asked. Yeah. Why? We had a big fight this morning. I gave him John's clothes that I had saved for him, and then he saw that I had cleaned out his dad's closet. I also put some pictures in an album. He was really upset. He called me names. I understood why she was so worried. You go home, and I'll try to find him and bring him to you. I headed back outside, got in my car, and drove where David had gone until I found him. I stopped, and he came over to the passenger window. I can go, he said simply, ready to walk away. Hop in, David. Your mom is upset, and I promised to take you home. I insisted. He thought for a moment, then shrugged. He came back, opened the door, and got in. I'm fine. I can walk, he said. I know, but your mom is worried about the talk you had this morning. She tells you everything. She just wants to help. Why did you come to get me if you're not going to ask for my job back after that fight with her? I wasn't planning to ask for my job back. He didn't finish his sentence, and I was glad I was home when he walked in. You're not taking sides, are you? He asked with a frown. I don't want to interfere between you and your mom, but I care about both of you. I think you might be too hard on her. It's probably tough to see her start dating again. We both looked ahead as I pulled into the driveway and drove toward Charlie's house. We were quiet for a bit. When I turned onto the road where Charlie lived, David spoke again. Life can be really tough sometimes, he said. Yeah, I replied, but you can either feel sorry for yourself, complain and let it control you, or you can take what comes and make the best of it. Is that why you might sell your house? I'm just thinking about it, but yeah, I guess so. We arrived in front of Charlie's house and she came out through the door. Do you want me to stay or go? I asked David as I saw my mom walking toward us. You should probably leave. I think I'm in for a talk. You're lucky it's just that, I said back. Yeah, I guess so. Thanks for the ride. I'll see you tomorrow, he said as he got out of the car. I heard my mom call him from inside, and then her concerned face appeared at my window. Thank you. Will you come in? Charlie asked, unsure. No, it's better if I wait here. Don't be too hard on him. I think he feels bad about this morning. I guess I'll find out. Are we still going out Friday night? The restaurant is booked and I can't wait for the food, I said excitedly. For the food or for me? Charlie asked with a bright smile. Take your pick. Get out of here before I get in trouble. Then I added, so how did you find out? I was thinking of something that wasn't allowed in some places. I joked, get out now before I make you go inside and be a referee. Charlie closed the car door and smiled at me. For the next 2 days, David came to my house after school. He helped me with the yard work, like mowing the lawn, edging the grass, and raking the leaves. It seemed like he and his mom had come to an understanding. I didn't ask any questions, and he didn't share any details. Before he left on Thursday night, we talked about what else we needed to do. I really wanted to repaint the garden fence and add some decorations around the windows of the house. David agreed, and we made a list of what we would need for the tasks. Just as I was about to drive him home, my phone rang. It was my sister. Excuse me for a second, I said. David nodded and walked over to the car. "Hey sis, what's up?" I asked, a little worried. "I heard from someone at the law firm. They have a court order and I have to testify about MySQL," she said. I couldn't believe it. "Wow, that's not great," I replied. "Did you find the phone records?" "Yes, I have everything. I'm meeting with them on Monday," she said casually. "Do you want me to get my own lawyer?" I asked. "No, I'll get my own. It will look strange if I use yours. Don't worry, I can handle this," she answered. "Is everything else fine?" I asked. "Yeah, but I have to go. I'm late for gym class. I'll call you over the weekend." She hung up and I felt uneasy. I walked to the car where David was waiting for me in the passenger seat. "Is everything okay?" he asked as I got in. "Maybe, but it's just a family issue, so you don't need to worry," I said, trying to brush off his concern. "Wait a minute, doesn't this involve me?" David seemed more upset than I thought he would be. "Yes, it does concern you. It's just news about the separation hearing," I explained. "Is it bad news?" he asked. "I hope not, but I'll know more in about 11 days. He might not have liked my answers, but he stayed quiet for the rest of the drive home. Charlie was at a meeting when I dropped David off, so I texted her to check if we were still on for the next night. She replied that she was looking forward to it. On Friday morning, I met Brian during our tea break to tell him that the other side was looking at MySQL. "Look, if you stick to your side of the story, you'll be okay," he said. "You were living with Rachel at that time, so they'll need to show you planned this way beforehand to claim you were hiding money." He looked at me curiously. "Did you ever mention giving money to your sister?" "No," I answered. "She and Rachel didn't always get along, so I didn't want to start a fight. Plus, I did try to hide the money, but not for a divorce. I just didn't want Rachel to use it for something fancy." I told Jeff that it's best not to admit anything in court. It won't just disappear. "I wasn't going to say that," I replied defensively. "Okay. Have your sister's lawyer send me a copy of her statement when it's ready, and we'll look at it next week." Throughout the weekend, I was distracted by the upcoming statement. I had a nice break at dinner with Charlie on Friday, but I was not really present, and she noticed. I told her that my divorce was having some problems, but she didn't push me to talk more about it. David came over on Sunday to start painting, but I mainly stayed home. On Monday morning, I found it hard to focus at work. At lunchtime, I sent my sister a text to wish her luck. By 3 o'clock, I was feeling anxious. I didn't hear from her until 5, and by then I was thinking about driving 3 hours to see her. After the formalities, I got straight to the point. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Nothing much, big brother. It only took 30 minutes, she said. "Why didn't you call sooner?" I replied, my irritation slipping through. "It was just a statement, not a big questioning. They heard my side and will probably try to find something against you if the case goes to a hearing." "I know that. But what did they ask about? Do they know about the 10 million? My voice was getting a bit loud. "Calm down, Jeffrey. Of course, they know that's why they questioned me. They asked how we bought the ticket. I said you called and showed them the call log. Then they asked about the company's money and how it grew in the last 6 months. I showed them my records, and then they left." "So no deep questioning?" I asked. "No, it was very professional. They got my history, copied my papers, and left. Can you send a copy of the transcript to Brian?" "Already sent it, Jeff. It should be in his inbox. I have to fly to my big brother's house now. I'm going out to dinner tonight. Bye." She hung up, and I grabbed my coat and headed to Brian's office. Unfortunately, he was in court that day, so I had to wait until the next morning to read the transcript. Brian was pleased with my sister's answers and thought our position was strong. I felt a bit better, but still wanted everything to be finished. On Wednesday and Thursday, I had dinner with Charlie and David. We got back to our regular routine. David would work at my place after school, and Charlie would join us later with dinner. Things felt a little different. Charlie and I could sense the start of something new, especially with David around. "Oh," Charlie laughed. "Looks like I should plan a sleepover for David this weekend." "That sounds like a great idea," I said with excitement before giving her another quick kiss. "Maybe you'll be too busy with your divorce. Maybe we should just wait until it's all done. No way. If you don't stop this, you'll find yourself at the door again. Promises, promises." Charlie laughed, breaking free from my hold. "I'll tell you how it goes this weekend." She waved goodbye and left. The next morning at 10 o'clock, my secretary came in and said Charlie was outside and wanted to see me. The gloomy day seemed brighter, but that changed when I saw her expression. She had an envelope in her hand, which she handed to me. I recognized the logo in the top left corner. It was from the loan company. They wanted her loan application for the rest of the day. Other friends of mine called to say they received letters too. A team was coming to town next week for a meeting, and they were all asked to come to a room at the local Veterans Club on Tuesday. Some of them, including Charlie, worried that what I was doing might be wrong. I assured them it was fine, then called my lawyer just to be sure. "Don't worry, Jeff. You've already documented everything. They're just adding more billable hours. With travel and staying costs, it will just get more expensive, and with that, their profits will go up." Despite these worries, Charlie and I were both excited. It turned out we had made a big deal out of nothing. Each person only spoke to the lawyers for about 10 minutes. They simply asked how much money and when they would pay it back. It could have been done over the phone, but apparently Brian was right. It's all about making more money from the bill. With that drama finished, I focused on the appeal hearing, which turned out to be quite dull. Rachel wasn't there, so her lawyers spoke while the judges asked a few questions and took notes. When the chief judge asked if there was anything else, Mr. Kerr said he wanted to speed things up because their client was in big financial trouble. The lady judge in her 50s cleared her throat and responded, "Mr. Kerr, your client owns a house." "Excuse me," he said. "A villa in the south of France. 4 weeks ago, he received $1 million. Many people would dream of being in that situation," she added. I couldn't help but chuckle. The chief judge shot me a look, waiting for me to quiet down before answering. "All right, Mr. Kerr, we'll think about that." He tapped his gavel and asked the clerk to read the title of the next case. Brian stood up and helped me get up from my chair, leading me out of the courtroom. Once outside, I asked, "When will we know the result?" "Probably in a week." "So, they won't decide today?" "No. The 3 judges will split up to write their own opinions. Then they'll meet in a couple of days to share their thoughts, and then they'll post the final decision on the family court website." "And then what happens?" I asked. "First, there's a hearing to decide when the case will be heard and how long it will take. Both sides submitted their papers with their arguments and lists of witnesses. The judges read everything and decided when to start the case and how long it would take. Then, we were ready for the big event. How long will it take?" Brian scratched his head and thought for a moment. "It's hard to tell. The hearings usually take around 4 months and then another 3 months for scheduling. But we know that Kay has some influence, so they might get the case heard sooner. The hearing itself shouldn't take too long. They won't want to spend too much time on it. Maybe just half a day, since it's only about dividing the property. The children won't be involved in this part. When there are arguments about abuse or neglect, it takes much longer." I sighed. "So we're just waiting again. There's no reason to make another settlement offer. I think they've made it clear that no matter what you offer, they're going to ask for more." "Honestly, Jeff, I don't see how the judges will give them more. We now have a real idea of Rachel's assets. But like I said, each day in court means more bills. Leeches," I said quietly. "Speaking of lawyers, we need to find you a lawyer. If the appeal goes well, you'll need one. The main office has a list of local lawyers who know the military stuff. We might be able to meet one today and save a trip." We had a list of 12 names, but sadly none of them could meet us. It didn't help that we didn't know how the appeal would turn out. They didn't want to waste time on something that might not happen. So I went home, and when I parked in the driveway, I saw David painting. I waved at him and went inside to change into a suit. I came back out in my old clothes just as Charlie was walking down the driveway. I waited for her at the door. We hugged, and then kissed again. I noticed David look up and quickly look away. He was still having a tough time, but he didn't act unfriendly. "How did it go today?" Charlie asked as we hugged tightly. "I'll tell you in a week." She gave me a curious look. "We have to wait for their decision," I explained. "And then it will be over." "Over?" she asked. "Hopefully." "No, Brian thinks they will accept the appeal. Then a hearing will be set to decide when to have the appeal, and then the appeal itself, and then hopefully it will be done." Oh my God, my head hurts just thinking about it. Charlie held out a shopping bag. "I bought fish for tonight's dinner. I can't have you eating all that takeout and getting lazy. Do you want to come in and chat while I cook?" I was just about to help David. All right then, she replied sadly. I'll call you when it's ready. After dinner, David went outside and started playing with his phone. Charlie got up and began clearing the table. I helped her carry the plates to the kitchen. She was going to load the dishwasher when I stopped her. Why don't you move in with me? I asked. Charlie looked unsure. Come on, you're here a lot. Anyway, I feel like I'm taking advantage of you. Are you using me or do you want to use me more? She shot back, sounding defensive. I was surprised by her reaction. You thought I'd like it if someone did everything for me, right? She interrupted. No, that's not it at all. I just thought it might be helpful. Charlie sighed. I'm sorry. Maybe that was a bit harsh, but I'm not your wife, Jeff. I feel a little unappreciated. I cook a nice dinner for you, but I get no thanks and little help. You're supposed to show me you care with flowers, compliments, little surprises. I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm feeling tired of this whole situation. Charlie's eyes narrowed. Come on, Jeff. You're not the only one dealing with stress. Do you even know what I want? No wonder Rachel left when someone paid her attention. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door and leaving me speechless. I heard her car start and drive away. I stood there staring at the closed door. David came back inside. Was that Mom? He asked. Yes. I asked her if she wanted to move in with us and it didn't go well. David raised an eyebrow. Guess you could say that. How am I getting home? He joked. I'll give you a ride, I guess. So she's not coming back tonight? Somehow I don't think so. I'll just put these plates away first. Then I'll drive you. I took David home. Charlie's car was in the driveway, meaning she was back. David invited me in, but I said no. He teased me, then got out of the car and walked up the driveway. The next day, I sent her flowers and a card to work, apologizing and promising to make things better. In return, I got a short thank you via text. David came to school the next day, but Charlie wasn't there. He caught the bus and went home without her. I picked up the phone several times to call, but I didn't know what to say. That evening, I thought of something. I called Tom Ballard at the local racing club to make plans for tomorrow. At 3:30, I was in the parking lot of the high school, leaning against Charlie's car. I saw her walk out of the school holding a bunch of books and searching for her car keys in her bag. When she found them, she looked up and noticed me next to her. She didn't run away, which I was happy about, but she did slow down and looked at me with some doubt. Hi, Jeffrey, she said briefly. I was wondering what you're doing tomorrow afternoon. I haven't decided yet, she replied coldly. Would you like to join me for the picnic at the Mandara Bar horse race? I asked, bending slightly and offering her a ticket. She took it and studied it for a moment. I'll think about it. What time could you pick me up? There was still no warmth in her tone. 10:30. Don't be late this time, she said as she walked past me. But I saw a little smile on her face. She got into her car and I stood still for a moment. I walked over to my car and just as I was getting in, my phone beeped. It was a text from Charlie. Better, but we'll see how you do tomorrow. I made sure to arrive 5 minutes early the next day, carrying a bouquet of flowers. When David opened the front door and saw me, he made a gagging sound and hurried away. I found Charlie in the bathroom putting on her makeup and handed her the flowers. Are these for me? She asked, her eyes wide. Yes, ma'am, I replied, trying to sound charming. Good boy, Charlie said, taking the flowers. See how nice things can be with a little effort? She added. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water and then browsed through a magazine in the living room. What was supposed to be 5 minutes turned into 15, but once Charlie appeared, it was all worth it. You look amazing, I said, setting the magazine aside and standing up. I felt a bit out of place next to her. We had a great day, and all the worries from the past few weeks faded away as we watched 2 more races. Charlie then pulled me to a quiet corner and whispered, I'm done here. Let's go back to your house. I looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? She nodded. Yeah, but let's get to the bedroom this time, okay? Charlie took my hand and we made our way through the crowd to the parking lot. On the way home, we held hands and enjoyed the silence. When we parked in the garage, I unlocked the house and led Charlie toward the master bedroom. For the next couple of months, it felt like we were young and in love when we were alone. Everything was easy, but going out with her friends felt different. I felt much older at gatherings with couples in their 30s. Charlie stayed close, which made it easier, but I still sensed they were curious about why she was with me. On the bright side, I didn't have many close friends, just acquaintances and business contacts. Charlie charmed everyone, and I received a lot of friendly looks. I enjoyed being around her and felt pleased when other guys my age looked at us with envy. We spent our weekends together, and sometimes, if she had a free afternoon, she would bring lunch to my office. Now and then I would also get to enjoy a sweet treat there. Not even a call from Brian telling me the appeal had been approved could ruin my good mood. Annie had once again managed to get the hearing moved. In fact, the head judge decided that a hearing wasn't needed and set the appeal for 4 weeks later. We planned to meet with the lawyer in Canberra and spent the morning going over our case with him. After reading our information and asking a few questions, Tom explained things to me. He shared 5 main ideas that the family court uses to decide how to split money and property in divorce cases. 3 of these ideas did not apply to us. He raised his hand with 3 fingers up, counting each one off as he spoke. First, if you had any assets before the relationship began, they don't matter, unless there was a prenuptial agreement. Second, what each person put into the relationship won't be considered. This is because your wife stayed at home while you brought in all the money. The third part the court may look at is child custody. But since the kids are no longer dependents, that's not a factor in this case. So, all we have to focus on is dividing the property evenly, he continued. It would be 50-50ths if your wife's age and job situation didn't play a role. Since she doesn't have formal qualifications and is unlikely to find a job that pays as well as yours, you should expect to pay her some support. I thought to myself, wow, we're paying this guy $900 an hour just for stating the obvious. Before I could find a witty way to say that we already knew this, Brian interrupted. Wait, how will the fact that Rachel already has some hidden assets affect our case? He asked. I struggled to hold back a laugh as I imagined Rachel looking in a mirror and asking if her assets looked big. Brian gave me a confused glance, but Tom didn't seem to notice. He leaned on the table, placing his hands together and resting his chin on them as if deep in thought. After a moment, he leaned back and, with another long pause, gave a simple answer. We'll find out on that day. He probably noticed me rolling my eyes. If I were representing your wife, I would emphasize that she needs enough money to support herself for the next 40 years since you have a successful business, he added. She likely won't be able to find a job that pays her like she got when she was with you. We believe that she has a good amount of money and is currently with another man. He is the main reason she doesn't have more money, I said, feeling frustrated with everything. Do you think we can get her to cooperate? I mean, with our arguments, I added, noticing that the lawyer didn't show much emotion. We will certainly try, but you should know, Jeff, it will cost you something, probably around $5 million. That's what we thought, Brian said. I think that covers everything. I would like to see how your wife is living now. Do you have that information? Not at the moment, I replied, then added, but I have a contact who might help. Great. Look into it and we'll talk again before the hearing. Tom closed the file in front of him and pushed back his chair, getting ready to stand up and show us out. I don't need to know anything more, do I? He asked cheerfully. I was about to say no when Brian interrupted. Yes, actually there is something. I looked at him confused. You should tell him about the other 10 million. I sat back down as Tom asked, what other 10 million? I was trying to think of how to explain. I actually won 30 million, but I gave 10 million to my sister. Was she part of your family group? Tom asked, looking suspicious. Well, we didn't have a family group. I had never bought tickets before. It was just luck. You won the first time you bought a ticket? Tom laughed in disbelief when I nodded. That's an amazing story. Is this outlined here? He asked, pointing to the file. Do you have proof that your sister helped with the ticket? Yes, I called her before I bought it. I have the call logs from both our phones and the lottery ticket stub from just a few minutes later. I'm an independent director of the investment company we set up for her, and it's on my list of work. So you are director of a $10 million company you created for your sister after winning 30 million. I explained further that I was an independent director for many companies as an accountant. He still seemed doubtful, especially when I mentioned that the company now had over 14 million in assets. What did she do? Get involved in illegal activities? No, everything is legal and there are no problems. Even though many former clients think futures traders are bad, Tom was still processing the new information and didn't smile at my attempt to make a joke. Has the other side found out about this? Yes, they questioned my sister. That changes things. They will try to use it against us if they can. That's their 10 million ticket. Tom held up his hands and made air quotes around the word story to show he didn't believe me. And that's why we need you. To make sure they don't break any rules, I replied, placing the responsibility back in his hands. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. The fact that it's an appeal should help. When there are 3 judges, they usually handle things quickly. Your wife's legal team won't have much time to ask a lot of questions. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll reach out to you about a week before the hearing. He turned in his chair and tossed our folder behind his desk, then picked up another folder and placed it on the desk. We were done. As I stepped outside, I looked for something to kick but found nothing. Instead, I let my frustration out by slamming the car door. "Easy, Jeff," Brian said, getting in next to me. I didn't reply and drove off towards home outside the city. I pressed down on the gas pedal firmly. My day got worse when I hit a speed trap over a hill. 15 minutes, $400, and 4 points off my driver's license later, I was even angrier. After dropping off Brian, I headed home, still in a bad mood. David was in the garden mowing the lawn. A real estate agent was coming tomorrow to check the house and help sell it. He looked up and waved. I nodded quickly, shut the door hard, and walked inside. I didn't know why I was so upset. This whole situation was overwhelming. I needed to get away and forget about it. I glanced in the mirror over the fireplace and heard Rachel's voice in my head. "You need a vacation." Looking at the bags under my eyes, I said to my reflection, "Yeah, I think I do." At that moment, Charlie walked through the front door. "Talking to yourself means you're going crazy," she said jokingly, coming up behind me. I didn't react but turned as she moved towards the refrigerator. "When's our next vacation?" I asked. "Not this Friday, but the next one." "Thank goodness," Charlie said as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Want some?" "No thanks," I replied, walking over to her. I put my arm around her shoulders and buried my face in her hair. I loved how it smelled. She leaned against me. "Hey, my sons are outside," Charlie said, pushing me away lightly. I ignored her and mumbled, "Let's go on vacation." "I have to work," she replied, leaning back in her chair. "I'm sure school won't miss you for a week and vacation is right after," I said. "I still need to pay the bills." "Yes, but your banker is pretty understanding." I brushed her hair to the side and leaned in closer. She turned around slightly to look at my face. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "But where are we going?" "Anywhere you want to go, David," I answered quickly. "You can come with us." "Sounds like you have it all figured out," she teased, giving me a hug. "Not really. I just thought about it when you walked in. It just kind of worked out on its own. That's not how you usually do things at all." "Maybe I'm starting to change you," I said. "Okay, I'll ask about it tomorrow at school, but you pick where we go." Charlie kissed me on the lips and then nudged me aside. "Now let me eat my dinner." I went to grab my iPad and brought it back to the kitchen so we could keep talking. I typed vacation into the search engine and looked at all the options. As I was flipping through the pages, an idea popped into my head. "Hey, Charlie, what if we went on a mystery trip?" She looked at me with confusion, like peeling the husks off a corn cob. We could fly to Sydney and take one of those mystery flights. We would spend a few days there and then come back on another mystery flight to a different place. We would go wherever the fun takes us. No tight schedules or plans. If we enjoy it, we stay longer. If we get bored, we simply move on. For how long? How long are school breaks? 2 weeks. Perfect then. We'll leave this weekend for 3 weeks and be back just in time for school to start, I said, feeling a rush of excitement. Charlie was unsure at first, but her boss did not mind, so we decided to go for 3 weeks. It probably helped that I was working on his annual tax returns and assisting him with his retirement plan. Our first flight took us to Adelaide, and from there we explored the country for 3 weeks. We visited Alice Springs, then Perth, Hobart, Melbourne, and Brisbane. By the end of our journey, we were tired of flying. Too soon we were back home and facing reality again. We were only 4 days away from the big family court hearing. I met with Brian, my lawyer, but there were no new issues. I spoke to my 2 daughters. They were a bit distant. They had been since I talked about my new relationship. I suspected Rachel was saying things to them. I thought they were still adjusting to their parents separating and both having new partners. I really hoped they were coping. My youngest daughter didn't want to talk to me at all. I called many times, left messages, but got no reply. When I finally reached someone, it was her husband. He made excuses about why she couldn't come to the phone, but I could tell it wasn't true. I was sad, but hoped that when all the court stuff was over, we could reconnect. The night before the court hearing, Charlie and I drove to Canberra, leaving David at a friend's house. I would have liked to go alone, but Charlie had to give her side of the story. I didn't understand what the other side was trying to prove, but I was sure we would find out soon. We stayed at a small hotel that I thought was nice enough, but I decided against it. The chances of running into Rachel would be too high. We took a cab to Kingston. Charlie and I walked along a row of restaurants, checking out the menus. We finally stopped at a cozy Italian restaurant that was mostly full. If the locals like it, then it's all right. Dinner went fine, but we didn't really enjoy it. We were both thinking about tomorrow. We left without having dessert and walked for 30 minutes to our hotel. Then we took a taxi for the rest of the trip. The next morning, I woke up early to the sounds of the city. We found a quiet coffee shop and sat down for breakfast. My sister called to say she would meet us, so we just sipped coffee and looked at the menu. A shiny new red Audi convertible pulled up, and my sister stepped out and came inside. I waved, and she walked over to us. "Hi, Jeff," she said with a big smile, taking off her sunglasses, and gave me a hug. "Hi, Jackie." She looked at me, then at Charlie. "Oh yeah, Jackie, this is my girlfriend, Charlie. Charlie, this is my sister, Jackie." "Hi, Charlie," Jackie said, shaking Charlie's hand. "Jeff has told me nothing about you, so I will have a lot of questions," Jackie joked. "I know what you mean. I thought he was an only child until this court case," Charlie replied. The two of them sat down and talked nonstop for the next 30 minutes. Anyone watching would think they had known each other forever. I sat quietly, sometimes cringing when the talk turned to my many faults. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Nice car. Is it new or old?" "I've had it for 4 months now. There's a new model coming out next month, so I'll switch it soon." As she spoke, my mind raced with thoughts about the cost and taxes, and I must have looked shocked. "Oh, and you both have to come to Sydney to see my new house," Jackie said. "New house? Don't you know that house prices in Sydney are thought to be too high?" I replied, feeling worried. "Come on, bro, I'm just teasing," Jackie laughed, then leaned over to Charlie. "You have to keep an eye on him. He'll make you live very simply if he thinks it will save money." "Not that bad," Charlie defended me. "I know Charlie, but he's so much fun to be around." They both giggled like young girls, and I felt myself turning red. "So, did you buy a house?" I asked when their laughter faded. "Yes, a newly remodeled 3-bedroom house in Balmain with a view of the water." "Sounds pricey. Just under 300,000, I said, trying to wrap my head around it. "Oh, Jeffrey, I thought you knew about Sydney prices. You can't buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Balmain for 300,000. More like $1 million, dear brother," she said, watching my shocked face with a smile. "I have 14 million in the bank, you know. Normal people would spend some of it," she added playfully. Suddenly, I realized what this was all about. A move before the trial? "Yes, I guess normal people would," I replied. We finished breakfast and walked the rest of the way to the family court. After waiting outside in the warm sun for a bit, we went inside. There were still 30 minutes until our meeting was set to begin, but we thought it would be best to check in with our lawyers. We found Brian in the cafe enjoying a donut. He told us that Tom, our lawyer, wouldn't arrive until very late because he was busy at another meeting. We let him finish his snack and went to sit outside our assigned courtroom. 10 minutes before it was supposed to start, the clerk opened the doors. A young man in a suit, who had been sitting nearby, hurried down the hallway talking on his phone. When he came back, he was part of a group led by Nigel from Waters, Anderson, Nelson, and Kerr. Rachel followed closely behind, with Jake on her other side. Our youngest daughter held Rachel's hand and gave disapproving looks at Charlie and me. A couple of junior lawyers and Rachel's attorney made up the rest of the group. They walked into the courtroom without looking at us. 5 minutes before it began, Brian showed up again, still finishing his muffin. He peeked into the courtroom and got the clerk's attention. The clerk then led Charlie and Jackie down the hall through another door to a waiting room. Brian and I entered the courtroom and took our seats. It was bright and spacious, resembling a modern office. The judge's bench was on a small platform at one end. 3 large black leather chairs stood empty behind the bench. A microphone stuck out from the bench, and there were computers for the court staff below it. On a separate side, there was another chair that I guessed was for witnesses. Brian and I sat at a white table directly across from the court staff. The table had a microphone and some power cords scattered on it. Tom, my lawyer, came in, plugged in his tablet, and sat down looking at his phone. There was a small area behind us for spectators, but those seats were empty in my case. To our left, Rachel sighed. My daughter looked shocked. Behind us sat my soon-to-be ex-wife and her legal team. The court clerk stood up and asked everyone to rise as the 3 judges entered and took their seats. After the usual introductions, the Chief Justice told Nigel to begin. He stood up and thanked the judges for hearing the appeal. Then he asked the secretary to bring in Charlie. She came in through a side door and sat down facing us in a chair to the left of the court staff. Nigel started his questions in a friendly way. It was clear that Charlie relaxed a bit. However, when Nigel stumbled, the judges looked unhappy. He stopped, checked his notes, and resumed his questioning. "Are you currently in a relationship with Mr. Blake?" he asked. "Yes," Charlie answered. "How long have you been together?" Nigel quickly moved on. Charlie shifted nervously in her seat, feeling embarrassed by the personal question being asked. Tom stood up and said, "Your Honor, the nature of their relationship has nothing to do with this hearing." The Chief Justice replied, "I agree with Mr. Arnett. Does that make sense?" I was starting to see the hidden truths in this family court. The Chief Justice interacted with Nigel like he was someone close. "Just a couple more questions, Your Honor," Nigel continued. The judge responded, "Okay, but please rephrase the last question." "Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Jones, how long have you and Mr. Blake been together?" Charlie answered carefully, "Almost 2 months." She didn't seem relaxed anymore. "But you've known each other longer?" Nigel asked. Charlie replied, "Yes, since the end of last year." "I see. Can you explain why Mr. Blake gave you $250,000 this January?" Nigel asked, turning to a paper. No. It was a loan to help with my mortgage until the insurance claim went through," she explained. Nigel paused, tapping his chin and looking at the paper. "We have a statement from Mrs. Jameson, Mr. Blake's neighbor. She says she saw you enter Mr. Blake's house in revealing clothing last November and leave an hour later." "I was in sports clothes," Charlie said, defending herself. It was clear that she was in court to be embarrassed, not to resolve the divorce. I glanced at Rachel, who had a smirk of satisfaction on her face. Nigel was clearly enjoying this. I nudged my lawyer, hoping he would stop the situation from getting worse. "It can't be easy raising your son on a teacher's salary and paying the mortgage. No one would blame you for finding help," Nigel said. But Tom quickly objected, cutting off the remark. Nigel then said he had no more questions before the judges could step in. Charlie's face turned red with anger and humiliation. Rachel and my youngest daughter smiled triumphantly. The head judge finally told Charlie she could leave, but I grabbed Tom's sleeve and requested he keep her there. Charlie sat back down, looking embarrassed by my lawyer's request, staring at me as if she wanted to escape. I wrote some questions on a notepad that my lawyer had. He tore off the page, studied it, then looked at me to confirm if it was what I wanted. I nodded, and he asked Charlie, "Miss Jones, who asked you to go to Mr. Blake's house last November?" Charlie replied, "The principal at my school told me to—" "Excuse me," he continued. Mr. Blake needed something translated from French. A slight smile returned to Charlie's face as she started to understand my plan. "And what was that?" he asked. "It was a recording of 2 people." I could see Rachel's expression change as she realized what was about to happen. Her smile vanished, replaced by fear. She jumped up and shouted, "Objection! Objection! Get her out of here!" Rachel yelled as Nigel tried to hold her back. The judge hit his gavel and called for silence. Nigel, with help from a younger assistant, sat Rachel down and turned to the judge. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but this is going nowhere and is wasting everyone's time. Nigel has already had his chance to hurt Miss Jones's reputation." Surely we can fix this, Tom argued. The Chief Justice went quiet. The woman judge beside him nudged his sleeve. She leaned in, and they had a quiet conversation before he spoke again. Mr. Arnott, you may continue. At least he wasn't just calling him Nigel anymore. Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Jones, did you say you were transferring a tape of 2 people? He asked. Yes, she replied. Mrs. Blake and a Frenchman named Jack are together. The room erupted in chaos. Rachel groaned and fell out of her chair. She had fainted. Nigel objected, saying there was no proof that such a recording existed. I took out my phone and waved it around, ready to play the recording. My daughter sat in shock, and when Jack tried to hug her, she pushed him away and ran out of the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel again, calling for quiet. Once things calmed down, he first removed Charlie from the room, then told both lawyers to stand and warned them for turning the courtroom into a circus. Rachel made her way back to her seat, and her lawyer found her with an empty folder. When the lawyers were told to sit down, the judge spoke to the room. There will be a 15-minute break so you can gather yourselves. If this continues, you will be asked to leave. The clerk told us to stand as the judges left the room. Tom turned to walk away with his phone to his ear, while the other side dealt with a shaken Rachel. Brian and I stepped into the hallway. Charlie was sitting on a bench. We walked over to her, and she stood up to hug me. That was awful, she whispered. I'm really sorry. I won't let it happen again. I hugged her tightly until I heard a small voice behind me. Daddy? I turned to see my youngest daughter, Julie, standing next to Brian. He quickly moved away. Charlie released me, but I kept holding her. There was a moment of awkward silence before I introduced them, and they shook hands. I'm so sorry, Daddy, Julie said softly. Everything happened so fast, and Mom was talking about you and me, and it just feels unfair. She started to cry, and Charlie gently nudged me toward her. I hugged my daughter for the first time since Christmas Eve. Despite everything going on, I felt good. I wish I could say there was the same warmth between Julie and Charlie, but sometimes you can't have it all. Maybe in time. Brian waved at me from the door of the courtroom, and I looked at Charlie. Do you want to come in? I asked her. You won't mind if I don't go in? She replied, her eyes full of hope. No, it's fine. I understand, I reassured her. Why don't you go shopping? I suggested. Yeah, I think I will, she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before walking away. Julie watched her leave. Why, Dad? You and Mom were married and then split up. Mom and I felt like strangers living together. Our issues piled up over the years like barnacles on a boat, making everything heavy and hard to manage. Just get rid of them, Dad. You've been together so long, she urged. We had good times, but we don't love each other anymore. There's no turning back now, I explained, tired of her stubbornness. She stomped her foot and said, No, Dad! Then she turned and walked off. I hoped she would come to understand one day. Brian poked his head out again, looking nervous. They're about to come in, he called, so I went back inside. After another serious warning from the Chief Justice, Nigel began again. He read an official statement saying that the lottery jackpot was $33 million. Next, he shared statements from people where I had given interest-free loans. They claimed I was trying to hide how much money I could gain, insisting that these loans should earn at least the same as bank savings. Nigel paused for a drink of water and then asked me to bring my sister in. Jackie walked in confidently and calmly. Nigel questioned her for 20 minutes, trying to get her to change her earlier statement. Tom was doing great as Nigel tried to connect Jackie's words to what we discussed right before buying the ticket. Suddenly, he shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor! That question has been asked and answered many times. We have clear proof that the phone call happened just before we bought the lottery ticket. Mr. Kerr is trying to cover his lack of argument by making the witness remember the exact words of a phone call from almost a year ago. The judges nodded, agreeing, before the Chief Justice spoke up. Mr. Arnott is right, Mr. Kerr. It looks like you have already questioned this witness. I suggest you move on. Okay, Your Honor, Nigel said, his face showing stress. Can I have 5 more minutes with this witness? Yes, but please keep it on track. Miss Blake, why haven't you spent the money you won yet? Nigel asked. I recently bought a house in Balmain and a new car, Jackie replied. How interesting, Miss Blake. Let me change the question. Why didn't you spend the money right away? Most people who win the lottery would spend it quickly. I needed the money to stay safe because it really wasn't all mine, Jackie said, standing her ground. Nigel tried hard to keep the talk casual, hoping Jackie would get mixed up. No, I was trading futures and I needed money to cover possible losses, he said. With a mocking tone, Nigel added, You needed $10 million for your trades? Really, Miss Blake, that story is hard to believe. Jackie responded, It's true. A lot of my money was in trades. Nigel was clutching at straws. He had seen Jackie's testimony and she never mentioned a number. A friend once told me that he would never ask a question unless he already knew the answer. $7 million, Jackie said without any doubt. $7 million, Nigel echoed, surprised. That's a huge gamble. It's my money, I can do what I want with it, Jackie replied proudly. The judges exchanged looks and nodded. Who would risk $7 million of their own money, let alone someone else's? Nigel was done. He asked 3 more questions, then gave up trying to break Jackie. Tom stood up and said, No more questions. Jackie walked toward the exit, having nothing more to say. We were ready for the final points from both sides. The judges called for a short break, and Brian, Tom, and I stepped outside, leaving Rachel and her team chatting. Once outside, I couldn't hold back my happiness. I did a little dance. Brian and Tom stared at me in confusion until I stopped. You seem really happy, Brian pointed out. Did you see Nigel's face when Jackie said, That's my money? It was like a paper bag blown away in a storm. You'll still have to pay them something, Tom said seriously. I don't care. It was worth it to get the truth about Charlie and me out there, and to see Nigel fall apart. Our talk was interrupted by a young member of Rachel's team who approached us nervously. We'll settle for $5 million, he said, shifting from foot to foot. Brian and Tom looked at me and I told the young lawyer, We'll think about it. Then I turned away from him. He hurried back into the courtroom. That's what you said you'd pay, Brian said quietly. Yes, but do you really think the court will agree to that much? I asked. Tom and Brian exchanged glances, then Tom nodded. No, they're worried. I doubt they'll get more than $3 million, including what you've already given them, plus Nigel and his team. Will they get a cut of the total? I wondered. I don't know how they charge, Tom replied. Maybe a percentage or a fee plus a percentage? Well, forget them. We'll see what the judges decide. I don't want to give them a dime more than I have to. Back in the courtroom, Brian handed over our response. We sat down and waited for the judges to come back. The final statements went just as I expected. Nigel tried to gain sympathy. He had been left by his partner after over 20 years of marriage and was now struggling. He talked about how I was giving money to strangers while I had to fight in court to pay what I owed my former partner. The odd thing was that he said all this without showing any emotion. Tom pointed out that Rachel was not really in trouble since she had plenty of money. Even though I was kind to friends and family, he counted what I paid to my 3 daughters. I still had some savings. Should I be punished for being careful with my money? I wanted to pay what was fair, but I felt that Rachel's requests were too much. When Tom finished, the judges talked among themselves. Then the Chief Justice spoke. He thanked the lawyers for keeping it brief. He said they had 3 more cases to hear that day, but since we wanted a quick decision, they believed they could decide by the end of the day if everything went smoothly. I left to find Charlie while Tom handled his next case. Brian said he would stay at the courthouse and check with the clerk about the judgment today. Charlie was at a clothing store in Canberra. I followed her for a bit before persuading her that we should have lunch. We bought sandwiches and went to a park by Lake Burley Griffin. I eagerly dug into mine while watching Charlie enjoy hers. She offered me the last piece and I gladly took it. Once I was full, I laid back on the grass under a tree and dozed off. I was waking up from a restless, nervous sleep from the night before. Charlie lay across from me with her head on my stomach. We were both sleeping when my phone rang. It was Brian. He said the judgment would be ready between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He sounded happy, and when I asked why, he said that a quick decision usually meant good news for us. We got up and went to the road to catch a cab. Even after a nap, we felt more tired than before. When we returned to the courthouse, we found Brian and my sister in the cafe. After checking his watch, he took us to the administrative area. I thought we were going back to the courtroom, but he said we would get the decision in writing and it would be posted online the next day. Charlie and I sat in a couple of chairs on one side while Brian went to the reception area. No sooner had he returned than Rachel, Jack, and their group showed up. They kept their distance from us and turned away. Brian came back and said there was still nothing. The woman he spoke to said judgments usually come by 4 but can sometimes be late. We stayed in our seats and tried to ignore the other group at the end of the hall. Finally, the girl at the counter turned to Brian and Mr. Kerr. She handed them both a paper which they looked over carefully before returning to their groups. Brian looked at me with a straight face and handed me the document. "Just tell me what it says," I said quickly. "It adds up to 2.5 plus half of the sale price of the family home," Brian said, grinning, "and that includes the $1 million I've already paid. Or that's on top of that," he added. "Oh no, so I only have to pay 1.5? I could hardly believe it. "Let's go celebrate," my sister said cheerfully. "Wait," I warned. "Is this really it? Are we done?" I asked Brian. "Well, they could ask the High Court to look at it again, but so far the High Court has never changed a family court decision. They see themselves as lawmakers and don't want to get involved with family issues. Plus, it costs a lot of money." "So he won," my sister confirmed, but I could see Brian was about to say something more. "For now, yes. Sadly, the family court process isn't over for good. At any time in the future, either side can ask the court to look at the case again. But without new evidence, that's not likely," he explained. There was noise in the hall. Nigel and his team were leaving with Rachel, demanding answers. "But you said, how can they? This isn't fair. There has to be something." Rachel stopped, but they kept walking. She looked over at Jack, but he just shrugged and followed the lawyers out. At that moment, Rachel looked at me. The strong front she had was gone, and she looked ready to cry. She looked more vulnerable than I had seen her in 20 years. She collected herself, fixed her coat, and followed her boyfriend out the door. The only sound was her heels clicking on the smooth floor. I had won, but I didn't feel like a winner right then. I contacted the office staff and made sure the money would go to a trust account. Then, at Jackie's insistence, we headed to the closest bar. There, we bought a bottle of expensive champagne and sat at a table. I tried to join in the happy atmosphere, but I wasn't feeling it. I excused myself and went to the restroom. I washed my face and hands and looked at my reflection in the mirror for a long time. When I came out, I almost bumped into Charlie. "I was about to get a search party together," she said, her eyes wide and her cheeks pink from the champagne. Seeing my expression, she softened and touched my face. "Why the long face?" "I have something to do. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Do you want me to come?" "No. It's something I need to do by myself." Charlie tilted her head, wanting an explanation. "You still care about her, don't you?" she asked gently. "Just a little. But I think it will always be that way. The last time I spoke to her, I said some awful things. I don't want to end it like that." "You really are different, Jeffrey." Charlie pulled my face close and kissed me on the lips. "Now hurry back," he said. I nodded, and he kissed me again before walking back to the bar. I stepped outside and looked for a taxi. I was already sitting in the back of one when I realized I didn't know where to go. Then I had an idea. "What's the most expensive hotel in Canberra?" I asked the driver. "It's the Hyatt," he replied. "Okay, take me there. Wait, first to Pepper's Gallery Hotel. I need to grab something, then to the Hyatt." "You got it." He smiled and pulled back onto the road. When I got to the Hyatt, the receptionist was not very helpful. She wouldn't confirm if Rachel was staying there. It didn't help that I told her I was Rachel's ex-husband. I guess she didn't want any trouble in the lobby because of a personal argument. Just when I was about to give up, I saw someone pushing a cart with fancy luggage. It was a long shot, but I decided to sit near the receptionist's desk in the coffee area and ordered a drink. A few minutes later, Jack showed up and Rachel was with him. They looked surprised to see me. When I called Rachel's name, she nearly jumped. "Come to show off, have you?" she snapped as she got over her shock. "No, I just want to talk for a minute." Jack stood next to her with his arm around her shoulders. "In private," I added. "Do you have a moment?" Rachel looked at Jack and said, "Please organize the bags in the taxi and do it right this time." I smiled inside, pointing to the table where I had just sat. She waved the waitress away and looked at me with a serious expression. "What's going on?" "I have a flight to catch." "I just wanted to say goodbye, and I'm sorry about what I said in France." No, you're not sorry, Rachel said sharply. Actually, I am. I was really upset back then, but with the kids and everything. I didn't mean for it to end up so bad. It did, and now you've won. So congratulations, she replied as she stood up. Come on, Rachel, can't we just move on? I asked. What do you want me to say, Jeffrey? Do you want me to say it's okay? You left me behind and drove off with someone new, she shouted. You and I see things very differently, I said, standing up too. We stared at each other as security staff gathered carefully nearby and other guests turned to look. Goodbye, Rachel, I said bitterly and walked out of the lobby. I got into the taxi and on my way to the bar, I reached into my pocket and took out an envelope. It was from Pepper's Gallery Hotel. When I opened it, I found a check made out to Rachel for $2.50 million. I looked at it for a moment before I started tearing it into small pieces and putting it back into the envelope. I tried to feel sorry for her, but her anger was too much for me. As I walked over to the table, I noticed that Charlie and Jackie had opened the second bottle of sparkling wine. Charlie saw me coming and jumped up to give me a hug. Are you okay now? She whispered in my ear. Yeah, how did it go? I replied. Not as good as I hoped, but maybe as good as it could be. Charlie pulled back and looked at me closely. What does that mean? After thinking for a bit, I answered, let's just say that the part of me that may have still cared about my ex-wife is gone now. Maybe that's the best end I could have wished for. Charlie looked at me carefully. Where's my glass? We're celebrating, right? I said with a big smile. The girls cheered and filled up the empty glass on the table. I raised my glass. Here's to the future. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.